No apologies. Okay, excellent. We're going to sign the minutes of...
Chairman, perhaps an apology from Alan Rennie. I'm in the council office in Oma.
That's grand, Alan. Thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you for that, Chair.
He's just joining.
Chair, can I just say the same, Chair? Barry Biggleduff here.
Barry, excellent.
And other business which meant it couldn't be in Enniskillen, so I'm joining for a moment. Thank you.
Okay.
Likewise from myself, Chair.
Excellent, lads. Okay, thank you. Okay. We're going to sign the minutes and confidential minutes of the planning meeting held on the 20th of July. So take the planning committee meeting in for accuracy. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Can I have a proposer and seconder? Rob and Paul. Thank you. And I apologize to anybody this side of me. I struggle to see over the top of the monitor, so which I am assured that we are working diligently on to get sorted out so that at least the chair can, without needing a sort of a booster, see the members in the chamber. So hopefully that shall happen. Okay, can we take the confidential minutes then of the 20th of July for accuracy? Page 1, page 2, and 3. And can I have a proposer and seconder for those? Earl and Paul. Thank you. Okay, have we any declarations of interest? None. Okay. So we're matters arising then. There's no matters arising there in those. So we're going on then to receive a report from the meeting of the ad hoc committee regarding the call-in of planning committee's decision, and that was 0463, and approve application 0042. So, Paul, all yours.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So agenda item 5 then in paper A, and this is a report from the meeting of the ad hoc committee regarding the call-in of the planning committee's decisions on 2 applications, LA 10 2022-0463, and that's an outline application, and LA 10 2021-0042, which is a full application. So we'll take each application separately, members. Application 1 then, members, LA 10 2022-0463. So, members, this report sets out the decision of the ad hoc committee, which was convened to consider that call-in. And then the steps that members can take in the next stage of the process in terms of their consideration. So the planning committee meeting members was held on the 22nd of June, and it was unanimously agreed at that meeting they refused planning permission for that application for 3 reasons. And the minutes of the planning committee meeting is attached as appendix 1.1. So on the 29th of June, the Chief Executive received a written request to call in the decision, and a copy of that request and the subsequent correspondence then set out in appendices 1.3 and 1.4. So that correspondence detailed in line with the standing orders how that ad hoc committee would be chaired and convened. And the ad hoc committee's role was to determine whether they support the decision of the planning committee or refer that decision back to the decision maker, which was the planning committee. So key issues, members, then, the ad hoc committee met virtually on the 16th of September, and the minutes of the ad hoc committee is attached as Appendix 1.5. The decision of the ad hoc committee was to unanimously refer that decision back to the decision maker, which is yourselves, the planning committee, for consideration. The planning committee is now required then to consider its decision and basically to satisfy itself that the issues raised via that call-in notice have been satisfactorily considered as part of the decision-making process. So members will recall the application was included in the weekly list on the 10th of June, and that had the recommendation to refuse planning permission. It was called in for decision by the committee. The application, along with the support and information then, was presented to the planning committee on the 22nd of June. That had a recommendation to refuse. The planning officer's report noted that the area in front of the cladded shed was around 40 metres wide, and that was comparable in most of the adjacent plots. The application site and the additional plot was wide enough to accommodate 3 houses, having regards to the surrounding plots, and therefore failed to meet that element of the policy, which only permitted a maximum of 2 houses in the gap. The report also advised that the site is not a small gap site within an otherwise substantial and continuously built up frontage. The officer's report also went on to say that the shed is accessed via a recently constructed stone laneway on the Fedden Road, which cuts through the middle of the field. The area between the shed and the road is part of the grass field, and as a result, whilst it faces the road, the building does not have a frontage, common frontage to the road. In terms of the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of June, members, you'll see the members' consideration of the application, and one member had proposed that the application be refused subject to 3 reasons within the report. During that debate, the officer advised that between the building and the road was a grass field, with or without a fence. This was not considered to be part of the house, the domestic curtilage, or the agricultural building. The recommendation to refuse the application was consistent with other applications that were presented to the committee. It did not have a common frontage to the road. The officer also pointed out that the critical issue within planning policy was to allow for the infilling of small gaps between buildings, and in this particular case there was space for 3 buildings along that frontage. Members then unanimously agreed to refuse permission subject to those 3 reasons. So members, at this stage then, the decision has been referred back to yourselves, and the options available are to confirm that you're satisfied that all the issues raised in the call-in notice have been fully considered and taken into account alongside all the material considerations, and that the committee upholds its previous decision to refuse the application, or in the event of outstanding issues or additional matters which members consider the call-in notice to have raised, to defer that decision to the October meeting of the committee. If this latter option is pursued, then the application will be represented back in the normal manner to the committee with provision for speaking rights for the application sought. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Any thoughts or comments, members? I'm looking for a proposal. Robert?
Thanks very much, Chair. It was an interesting one. We were unanimous at the time, though there were a couple of issues brought up by the agent that maybe need further exploration. Rather than actually coming to an unanimous decision again with regard to our original decision, I would propose that we bring it back in October and just rerun it. That's my proposal, Chair. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thanks, Robert. We have a proposal on the table. Have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. Are we all agreed, members? Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And just to conclude then, members have went with the latter option. The application will be represented then to the October Planning Committee, and will advise the applicant agent and any objectors to seek speaking rights. Okay, Chair, then moving on to application 2, which is LA 10 2021 0042. It's a full application. So at the Planning Committee meeting on the 20th of July, the committee, by the majority of votes cast, voted to grant planning approval for the application, and that was subject to conditions with authority delegated back to officers to agree the final wording of those conditions. On the 27th of July, the Chief Executive received a written request to call in the decision, and again, correspondence issued as attached as appendices. And that set out, the detail of convening the ad hoc committee again. So again, the ad hoc committee met virtually on the 16th of September, and the decision of that committee was to, again, unanimously refer the decision back to the decision maker, which is the planning committee. So again, the planning committee is now required to consider their next steps for the application. Members will recall that the application was included in the weekly list of notifications on the 27th of May, and that had a recommendation to refuse permission. The application was called in for determination and was presented at the meeting on the 20th of July with a recommendation to refuse. The officer's report noted that the farm had operated in its current format for a number of years. There was no information that anything had changed, which now required a new farm building, and indeed one of the size and scale of the building that was proposed. Although feed may be purchased in larger quantities at a reduced cost, it wasn't demonstrated that this was essential for the efficient functioning of the business. So the minutes of the meeting held sets out the members' consideration of the issues in the application. One member stated that, in his opinion, the recommendation before the committee was fraught with impracticalities, and he suggested that it was unacceptable to expect the applicant to leave machinery outside and open to the weather conditions. And he strongly believed that the bulk buying of hay and straw was essential to the running of this farm. Another member proposed that the committee go against the officer's recommendation to refuse the application and grant planning approval. And he stated he believed that the restrictions could be put in place to make it acceptable to neighbours, but again strongly believed that the shed was essential for the farm business. Members then resolved by the majority of 6 votes to 4 to grant planning approval for the application, and that again was subject to conditions delegated back to officers to agree the final wording of those. So members, the ad hoc committee, the options available to you in light of the decision of the ad hoc committee is you can confirm that you're satisfied that all issues raised in the call-in notice have been fully considered and taken into account alongside all the material considerations, and you uphold your previous decision to approve application LA 10 2021 0042 subject to conditions, or in the event if you feel that there's outstanding issues or additional matters which the call-in notice has raised, to defer that decision to the October meeting. And again, if it's deferred to the October meeting, it'll be represented in the normal manner with speaking rights and all. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Rob?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tom. I remember it was a fairly detailed discussion, and it hinged essentially basically on a landmark building. I believe the decision was right, even though it went against the officer's recommendation, and my proposal now would be that we accept the original decision and just ratify it now. It's my proposal.
Okay.
Once
Sure.
again, happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, and Earl?
Yeah, I was going to come on and second it there, Councillor Rainey, but you put me to it. I'm happy to support Councillor Irvine's proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Earl. John?
And the left.
Good.
Through the door and to the left.
Ben?
Yes, Chairman. Well, I would take a different view on this application. And I suppose I recall there was quite a bit of debate and discussion around the application, but however, I do feel that there's merit in looking at the application again, and I would support it being deferred back to the October meeting. It wasn't a unanimous decision. It doesn't have to be, of course, but in my view, I would propose that we do look at it again in October. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. And Mary?
Thank you, Chair. I have just a question, maybe if you can, to some of the officers. This call-in system that we have has been fairly new, just as we know, has come in to the planning committee. And I was just wondering, we did send letters off, if I recall right, if I'm wrong, to see if there was anything, that these were decisions that were reversing. Is there any update on that, or have I picked that up wrong? Or it's just, I think we're going over a lot of old ground all the time again. And I think it's a dangerous precedent maybe start, but maybe I'm just a bit confused in that, Kim, but maybe you could enlighten me.
You're correct. We have written to the department raising this issue and asking for the loophole in the legislation to be addressed, but it will take legislation to address that, so it's likely to take some time. We don't have a timetable, although we have been pressing DFI to provide us with that.
I think it's proven to be just a very dangerous scenario that has arrived at us, so it's unfortunate. I do not think it's a good thing that we're calling things in and changing decisions again. So I would not support calling either of them back, but I'm happy with the committee's decision as a group.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Okay, members. Barry?
Does Councillor Campbell's proposal need a seconder? If it does, I'm happy to second it if that's the case.
Okay, thank you, Barry.
Yeah.
And you weren't indicating Alan there, no?
No, I'm not. I did second the original proposal there.
No, that's okay. Okay, and I have no other speakers, so I'm going to take the first proposal first, I suppose, and that's Roberts, that we hold a decision, and I want to see a show of hands, is it, for to go with that course of action?
Take me as one, Chair.
Okay, we'll count you as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, those against? 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Myself, Chair, as well, Barry.
And yourself 6. So we're tied, so cast and vote. So I'll go that it's referred back in. Okay.
Okay.
We'll get a look at them, but as Mary says, they are going to be elongating our process of things are called back in for a redecision and a rerun. Okay, but legislation will have to catch up with us at some stage, I suppose. Okay, we're going to move. Paul, did you want to just summarize there first? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. In relation to the application to then LA 10 2021 0042, members have decided to bring that back before committee in October, and the chair had the cast and vote. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, we're going to go on to item number 6 to consider 4 files. And our first file then 0690.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, members. So paper B then, application number 1 is LA 10 2022-0690. It's a full application for the widening of existing public path and cycleway by McNean Community Partnership. At the location then is the Cottage Meadow in Belcoo. The recommendation is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to one condition. Just take you through the details then, members. So on the screen then is a site location plan, and the red line runs around the existing paths that are on the site and encompasses the whole area. The aerial photograph then, if members may be familiar with them on the ground. So the aerial photograph shows the location of the paths. You can make them out there amongst the green lawns and green grass. And the proposal then is to widen all of the existing paths out. So all the paths that you can see on the slide will be widened out, and just details of those. So, and more information. Then you can see the dotted line then is the existing path, and they will be widened out then to the solid line to create the 3-meter wide, the 1.8 meter wide path. This is the cross section of the drawing. Then you can see the details then of the construction of the path, as well as the width of it. There is an annotation on the plan showing a duct for bollard lighting cable. However, there is no proposal within the application for lights at this stage. It's purely for the path. So the recommendation then is to approve the application and subject to the one condition.
Okay, members. Anthony?
Thanks, Chair. Just proposed recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And Robert seconding. Are we all agreed, members? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on. 0659.
Okay, members, so application number 2 then is LA 10 2022-0659. It's an outline application for 2 dwellings and garages in a cluster, and the applicant then is M. McGurr. The location then is approximately 60 metres west of 85 Glengesh Road, Emeroo and Tempo, and the recommendation is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 6 conditions. In terms of the application, members, the proposal meets all of the policies under CTY 2A as a dwelling within a cluster. The amended plans have been received and now provide the visibility displays of 2.4 by 120 metres. Neighbours have been notified of that, and the date for the public consultation expires on Friday the 23rd of September. So we're slightly ahead of ourselves. However, no objections have been received to the original plans, and to date no objections have been received. The application will be held to allow the expiry of the public consultation period, and if representations are received specifically in relation to those plans, the application will be brought back, members. However, I'm content that the application can progress based on the information before you. But as I say, if a representation is received, we'll bring it back again. So the application then is for 2 dwellings within a cluster. The site location plan then is on the screen, and you can see the revised plan includes the visibility displays of 2.4 by 120 along the sides of the road. And the plan also shows then the location of the other buildings and houses in the area and the proximity to the crossroads. I'm sure members will be aware of where the post office is as well. The site itself then is directly opposite number 85 and includes a large field at the front with 86 to the side and 76 below it. It's just another slide showing the location of it in relation to the other buildings in the area. And that's just a photograph then of the site as you travel towards the sites on the left-hand side. So, members, the recommendation then is to approve planning permission as the application meets the policy test of CTY 2A, subject to 6 conditions.
Okay. We have representation then by the applicant.
Oh, apologies, members. Sorry, that shouldn't be included. It's just straight to the debate.
Okay, thank you. And Were you indicating, Tommy? No?
Chair, I was happy to propose the recommendation with the 6 conditions.
Okay. John?
Yeah, happy to second with the caveat, Chair. Thank you.
And Rod?
Happy to support. The caveat obviously is it's subject to no objections.
Actions coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, are we all agreed, members? Okay, thank you all. Moving on to 0813.
So application number 3 then is LA 10 2022-0813. It's a full application by the council for a multi-use trail, which consists of 0.6 kilometres of new trail and the upgrading of 0.35 kilometres of existing path. The location then is 200 metres southeast of the Ecclesville Centre in Fintona. And the recommendation is to approve permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to one condition. So I'm sure members will be familiar with the area, the Ecclesville Centre then, and the forested area around the site. A large area of the forest has been cleared along the public road, and the path then will go through this area. And it's shown on the screen then in red. So just zoom in a bit closer. So you can see the Ecclesville Road then is the purple line. It's just beside the purple line, sorry. There's an existing path, which is a dotted blue line between A and B, and then the new path will run along and join between B and F at the bottom of the slide to connect in the existing pathways. And as I say, it's approximately 0.6 kilometres long. Cross section of it then.
Chair,
1 second. Alan, go ahead.
I want to declare a declaration of interest here. I'm the chairman of the Ecclesville Centre.
Better late than never, Alan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Barry, you have your hand up there. Nothing in particular. Are you waiting?
Just waiting, Chair, I'm just waiting on the conclusion of the officer. I have something in mind at that point. Thank you.
You're first in line then after
Yep.
the conclusion. Sorry, Darren, carry on.
Okay, members, so the cross section then on the screen shows that the path is 3 metres wide with the sloping sides, which will be covered with excavated spoil. And underneath to the side is a V-shaped trench, which will collect the water. And the finish on the top then is a blinding top. So there are a few water courses and waterways within the site, and there's proposal to cross those with the new bridge and also to culvert some of the smaller ones to get access across the path. So the recommendation then is to approve permission subject to the one condition.
Okay. Thank you. Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would be happy to propose the adoption of the recommendation in this case, which is approval with that condition. If it's appropriate to do that, I'm happy to move straight away to that proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. Earl?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll second the recommendation to approve with the condition. Thank you.
Okay. We have it proposed and seconded to approve. Are we all agreed? Thank you, members. Moving on to 0720.
Remember, so paper B, application 4 is LA 10 2022-0720. It's a list of building consent by the council for the replacement of hardwood painted single glazed casement windows with hardwood painted double glazed casement windows. And the location then is in the Town Hall, 2 Town Hall Street, Enniskillen. The recommendation is to approve list of building consent for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 2 conditions. Just take members through the details on the screen then. Members are the scanned copies of the original drawings of the building. I'm sure members know it well, and that's the other elevation then. And photograph. So that's a photograph then of the windows, members, and you can see there are a lot of different windows, various shapes and sizes on both frontages. You can see a few photographs of them all. They have all been recorded on the file, and there's information in relation to each window. And that has all been pulled together with a survey plan. So the top, you can see the 4 floors on the top. Each window then has got a number, a reference number, And then below that, you can see each individual window has also been referenced and commented on it. If we just pick the windows in the council chamber, you can see FW1 behind us. So the windows that are there, obviously stained glass, which are important as part of the character of the building. And the comment there on the screen, members, shows that their stained glass will be retained between the double glazed units and will be an important part of the proposal. So obviously, as a listed building, a statutory consultee then is the Heritage Service up in Belfast, and they have come back and they are content and have been involved with the proposal and have no issues. So the recommendation then, say members, is to approve for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 2 conditions. I have ran the 2 conditions past the agent, and they are content that the conditions and the wording of those are all acceptable in terms of the design and the construction of the new windows. So there's no issues there that'll crop up later on. So I'd say the recommendation is to approve.
Thank you very much. Paul.
Over recommendation and the 2 conditions.
Thanks, Paul. And Robert?
Thanks, Chair. Happy to second the proposal by Councillor Robinson.
Okay. Are we all agreed, members? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes that. We're moving on to item number 7. And we have 5 delegated files for calling. And application number 1 is 0388. And that is a single-story extension to the rear, improvements to dwelling. Darren.
Just give me a second, councillors. That's the wrong one.
Sorry, my hour. So we have 2 speakers in as well. You're very welcome, ladies, Bernice and Sharon. So, Darren, your own good time.
Few technical difficulties, apologies.
It's all right.
Let's just get this working. Okay, members, so the first application on paper C then is application number 1, LA10 2021 0388F. It's a full application by C. Murray for a single-story extension to the rear and improvements to dwelling. And the location then is 76 Hillview Road in Enniskillen. The recommendation then of officers is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 3 conditions. Just before we go through the report, member, just a couple of updates. Apologies, there's 2 small typos within the report. I'd just like to clarify. On page 3 of the report, on the first paragraph, the reference is 74 and it should be 78. And on page 3 under the planning appeal, there's a reference to 74, but that should be 80. However, I don't think it prejudices the report, and I will go through in detail the proposal before you and make sure that that's clarified. Members will recall there was a site meeting, a site visit to the property, and the minutes of that has been sent on to everybody. Just in relation to that, I'll just go through. So members visited the site and the rear of the property. They noted the location of the property in relation to the neighbouring dwellings, pointed out the objector's property and nearby other applications that had been considered by the council, including the refusal, which had been subsequently approved on appeal. Members accessed the rear of the application site and viewed the location of the proposed extension and also the location then of the new window on the side of the property. Also, the levels were discussed and noted, and I'll go through those in details with you, members. At the meeting, there was a comment about the wooden shed and whether it is to be retained, and also then whether the plan reflected the size of the shed. And again, I'll come on to that. There's also a concrete building on the site, and there was a query raised about whether that's to be retained. And as I say, I'll raise that and go through that with you. Members then left the site, walked around the houses to the front of the property, and all members noted the location of the objector's property in relation to the application site, and the building line especially, and the boundary fence. Members then took the opportunity to visit the property inside of the objector's property and exited out the rear. So I think members have a copy of all those minutes, and that is before you. So in relation to the application then, members, I'll take you through the details then on the screen. So the application site then is number 76, and it's outlined in red on the screen. So there are a number of other properties nearby. So there's 74, 76, which is our application site, 78 then, which is the objectors, and number 80 then is the other half of the beside number 78. So our application site then is number 76. So just to overlay that onto an aerial photograph, you'll note, members, then 74, the application site, and 78. The building line then, the properties 74 and the application site are set forward of the building line of number 78. And you can see that the three pairs of semi-detached buildings then are staggered along the edge of the road. Looking at the application site from the front, you can see the application the site with the yellow star is the application site. The third party objectors then is number 78, which is the right-hand side. And the view then from the rear, members will recall from the site meeting. So the application site then is the yellow star over on the right. And you can see then the objector's property then on the left-hand side of that. And the other properties then beside that. So the proposal before you, members, that's the proposed plans. And you can see then the proposed plans on the left, and then the existing plan is the small rectangle in the center. So if we just zoom in then, I'll show you some more details as we go along. But the number one, take these in order. Number one then is a new ground floor bedroom. Number two then is a new shower room. And adjacent to that, there's a lobby. There's a blue line then which shows the existing rear elevation of the property. Number three is the existing kitchen. And four is the existing sitting room. And then you have 5 and 6, which are the boiler and the oil tank. And as I say, I'll come on to those in a second. So we take the extension first of all. So that's the blue is the new extension. You can see it coming out from the rear of the property for a shower room and a ground floor bedroom. And that's a photograph, members, then of where it'll come out from the house. And you can see the bank then on the right-hand side, which is supported by a retaining structure at the moment. So that will be excavated out to allow the finished floor level of the new extension to tie in with the dwelling. So the rear elevation then, looking at the back of the property, you can see the extension then is on the screen. And that's the elevation then facing towards number 74. And you'll note, members, there is a letter of support from them. And that's the objectors, the view towards the objectors. So you can see the extension coming out from the rear of the property, members, with the door and the window in the extension. And then there also is a new window on the left-hand side of the extension. So just to go through those details then, members, the proximity to the neighbour is obviously an important material consideration. And in this case, the extension is sited over on the opposite side from the objector's property. The black line then shows the outer edge of the extension. And you can see the separation distances then to the common boundary. There is then a path on the other side of that common boundary, but the distances to the common boundary are approximately 3.5, 2.7 and 1.8. Also, as part of the proposal then, there will be a change to the ground levels and an oil boiler and an oil tank. And you can see the oil tank then on the top and the oil boiler. So the changes to the ground levels. So red is the existing ground levels. And you can see the extension will require the removal of some of that to allow the finished floor level to tie in with the existing dwelling. And you can see the green line then is the reduced ground level. The extension then will be supported by a retaining, that ground will be supported by a retaining structure. The plan before you then shows the location of the oil tank, and you can see the details of that on the screen with a red rectangle. The yellow star then is the lowered ground and the new steps then up to the back gate, and that area then is supported by a retaining structure. So the green then is the plans that the agent has submitted, and you can see it's annotated at the bottom there, existing garden shed retained in its current position. Now that green rectangle is obviously not the size and shape of the existing garden shed. However, I don't think there's any prejudice to anybody in progressing on, and there's no requirement to seek amendments to the drawing to show the proper size and dimensions of the garden shed. Planning officers are very familiar where the garden shed is located, the size and scale of it. Members have visited the site. It also doesn't require planning permission to be retained. And had it not been mentioned or referred to on the drawing, it wouldn't have been raised as an issue that the plans are incorrect. So I don't think there's any prejudice by going on with the plans that we have before us. The council has the proposed extension. We are familiar with the details of it, the dimensions. The other works then, the relocation of the oil tank and the boiler are all included in it, along with the windows. So I don't consider there's any prejudice progressing on. So you can see then the shed then, that's in front of you. To the left of shed, members, there was a small concrete structure, if you recall, from the side. So that will be removed to allow the extension to go ahead. And that was one of the queries that was raised at the meeting. So the applicant's property is on the left and the third-party objector's property is on the right-hand side. The objectors then have helpfully provided some drawings, which I put on the screen for assistance to members to show the location of the neighbouring windows. And I'm sure the third parties, if they wish to refer to these, if they keep a note of the drawings, I can go back to them, the numbers of them. So the access path then comes in. You can see the third party's house, the sunroom, living room and kitchen, and the two windows with the location of the existing shed. And the dashed blue line then is the boundary between the two properties. The objectors have helpfully again shown the location of the oil tank on the plan in relation to their windows. And you can see there are two windows. There's one opposite the existing shed and one opposite the kitchen for the oil tank. And that's the two windows. Members will recall from the site visit, the two windows. And again, members, just a photograph of the two windows. And that's a view inside the kitchen, looking towards the application site, where the oil tank will be with the screen wall around it. So again, members, that's just a reminder where the third party's property is in relation to the application site. And again, these are drawings that have been provided by the objectors, and I thought it useful to put them on the screen. They are included on the planning public access, so they are disclosable. The members can see them. And as I say, if the objectors wish to refer to them, if they keep a note of the numbers, the slide numbers. Again, these are other drawings provided by them. A photograph provided by the third parties. Again, another representation from the third party showing the design cross-section. Shows the angles of the light together with the location of the firewall around the oil tank and the window. And again, another drawing, an objection to the application. So in terms of the planning history at the site, members, this is a material consideration. There was a previous application, LA 1016-1302, for a single-story rear and side extension to the dwelling. That was refused planning permission and the subsequent appeal dismissed. And an important part of the appeal was the impact upon the amenity of the neighbours. And that's where the Commission agreed with the Council and the third parties that there would be harm to their amenity and along the length of the property, which significantly worsened the living conditions of residents of number 78 from loss of light overshadowing dominance. And so the appeal was subsequently dismissed. Our application is on the opposite side of where that extension was proposed. And you can see the blue arrow then is the separation between the extension and the common boundary. There is a previous approval at the site, and you can see that's for a bedroom and ensuite extension coming out from the rear of the property, which is roughly in the location of the current extension. In terms of the other planning history in the area, members, so our application site is the yellow star. The objectors then are the green star, and over in the left, number 80 is the blue star. Members will recall there was an application for an extension to a dwelling at that property, which was refused, and the applicant subsequently appealed that to the Planning Appeals Commission, and the Appeals Commission granted planning permission for it. And that's the details of it. So you can see the blue star on the right-hand slide is the location of the extension coming out, and the objector's property then is number 78. So that appeal was successful, and planning permission was granted for that extension. So members, the recommendation is to approve the application for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the conditions, 3 conditions.
Okay, thank you very much, Darren. And we have our speakers in now to present to us. So you're very welcome to the Planning Committee. And first up is Bernice. Sharon wants to go first. Do you, Sharon? Okay, so you have 10 minutes and you can allocate that between yourselves. So Sharon, in your own good time, if you just press the little button there so I can get a cue. Okay.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name, as you know, is Sharon Gallagher. I'm representing my elderly parents, Jerry and Anne Kelly.
Sorry, Sharon, just to stop you, just to clarify that, that's 5 minutes there for the...
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, as you are probably aware, I'm representing my elderly parents, Jerry and Anne Kelly, who, as you know, live in number 78. We are actually objecting to the approval of the associated works relating to the construction of a firewall and the relocation of the oil tank, which is in the related condition, because it will ultimately result in an adverse impact in the quality of my parents' home and their living conditions. First of all, I would like to thank each and every one of you who took the opportunity to attend the site meeting and for your patience that's needed to completely understand what is being proposed here, because the reality of what is on paper is completely different when you experience the proximity of the proposed construction of the firewall to the kitchen window of our property. I would like to reference at this stage point 8 on page 8 of the report in front of you today, and the condition being attached to the recommendation for approval. It states that the firewall to be built in front of my parents' main kitchen window shall be no higher than 2 metres above the existing ground level. My question to you today is, what is the ground level we're talking about here? Because the existing ground level mentioned in this condition is actually the level of the elevated garden and not the existing ground level of the property in question. Therefore, that is an issue. This needs to be addressed and requires discussion. And I would respectfully request that you all ask the planners on my behalf and our behalf exactly how this proposal meets planning policy, because as far as we're concerned, the permission to build the firewall construction is going to result in the loss of light, overshadowing and dominance, and duly and adversely affect the residential amenity, and would be in contravention of the policy extension 1 of PPS 7 addendum. While the report in front of you today only refers to the proposed extension, it is the relocation of the oil tank and therefore the construction of a firewall in such close proximity to our kitchen window that is our main area of contention. We need this addressed and resolved, please, and thank you. We have been trying to mediate and highlight this issue since May 2021. This is not, nor has it ever been, about not recognising the applicant's right to make amendments to their home to complement their needs, but we also have the right to ensure and insist that due consideration has been given to the protection of my parents' living conditions. We do not consider that this proposal has taken into account the detrimental effect the repositioning of the oil tank will have. And again, I would respectfully ask you to tease this out, tease this issue out with planners and how it has been met and how it has met planning policies that should be there to protect neighbouring properties, to minimise any impact which would reduce the neighbours' daylight and adversely affect their amenity to an unacceptable level. My parents' living conditions and their rights deserve your respect to ensure that they are not adversely affected to an unacceptable level because of the proposal in front of you today. I should not be here today pleading with you all some 6 years later to implore that you all do not make a decision to plunge them into a dungeless existence for the remainder of their lives when the applicant and my parents should be enjoying the golden years of their lives. It should never have come to this. The agent and applicant have been afforded 5 separate opportunities to submit amended drawings over the duration of this application. They knew the issue of dominance of the firewall was the contention, yet nothing has been forthcoming by way of making any concession to ensure our property would not be impacted by this proposal. This is very unfortunate, and hence why I'm here to implore that you help and give it your attention today. I need you to ask the planners on our behalf were alternative opportunities ever explored. Were the impacts of my parents' amenity space and living conditions carefully considered? Was there any consideration given to the possibility of retaining the oil tank to where it is or close to its current location, given the fact that the original coal house is to be removed and the shed that is in situ is to be reduced in size to what it currently stands? I would also like to further reference page 3 of the report and the Heading Plan and Appeal 2017-A0021. Our objection and argument about building any block construction in such close proximity to the gable windows of our property was ruled upon 5 years ago by the planners and an appeals commissioner and upheld the decision. At that time, as you can see on page 3 of the report in front of you, the commissioner stated that to position a 2.2 metre high blank gable wall at the ground level of both properties would have an unacceptable impact on the residents' residential amenity and would significantly worsen the living conditions of the residents of number 78. As you can also see in the report, the commissioner stated that the proposal would result in loss of light, overshadowing and dominance for the residents of number 78, which would unduly and adversely affect the
And you'll have to start drawing it to a conclusion.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Sorry. I'll just finish out by this. I would implore you to understand what is at stake here today and come to some form of resolution that will be acceptable to both parties. I also believe that there's an opportunity. It's regretful that the third slide that I did present, there was 2, but not the third one, shows how detrimental the firewall is going to be to our living conditions. And I implore that you consider what's at stake here today. And thank you for listening to me.
Okay. That 5 minutes goes really quick, Sharon. So,
Oh my gosh, I could go on for another 10.
very good.
If you want to ask me any questions, fire away.
Swiftly to Councillor Swift.
Right, okay. I think the questions come then when I finish. Thank you.
Hold on.
Oh, it is now a question?
Yeah, this member's question. Okay. Members' questions? Have we got any questions, members? No? Nobody indicating? Okay. Sean?
Sorry, thank you for the presentation. Have you any ideas of what could be done with the oil tank? If it was at ground level, would that, of the both properties?
I mean, Darren showed you the drawing of the application.
Just come closer to the mic.
Sorry, you were showing the approved drawings that are currently in situ for the applicant, and it shows where the oil tank is to be retained. And the buildings are so similar, I just don't understand why it has to be relocated to stand on stilts in front of our kitchen window that requires a firewall. And
okay, John?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, or leave it where it is.
Leave it where it is, or at least if it was at ground, if the...
No, it's going to be sitting on the ground where it currently is at the minute anyway. It doesn't need to be, in my opinion, humble, moved to stand on stilts that requires a firewall in front of our kitchen window. There is, the possibility of it remaining where it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll tease it out with the planners.
Yeah. Okay. There's no other questions, so I'm going to give the floor to Bernice.
Gurmagat.
You have your 5 minutes, Bernice.
Okay, right. Thank you all for your time and effort thus far in this application. And I'm fully supporting the Kelly family's issues already outlined by Sharon, because the approval presented is unacceptable, particularly the elevations which, if allowed to go ahead with the oil tank and the associated firewall, will definitely adversely and unduly impact on the Kelly family. It is the relocation of this oil tank that is presenting the problem, because it will be in such close proximity to their kitchen window, and that is the main area of contention here today, as was shown on page 3 of the report in front of you. And again, Sharon outlined the area of concern by the Commissioner, that if it went ahead, the whole issue would have an unacceptable impact on the residents. The existing ground level mentioned in this condition is actually the one that Sharon has already said is the issue, not the ground level of the property in question. And that's the absolute pertinent point, Councillor McCloughery, you made, that needs to be thrashed out. And I implore that today, that that's thrashed out. Sharon has already said, why can it not be left where it is? And you've already seen the darkness and undue dominance and darkening down of the kitchen, which is already unacceptable, never mind proposing that another monstrosity could be built in front of the Kelly family kitchen window. And I want to make it quite clear here today too, nobody is against anyone requiring occupational therapy extensions for their health needs. But the case here is the fly in the face of the PPS policy, with the dominance and overbearing being the definite, just 2 descriptors for this particular application, of which I want you all to seriously consider. You all know that within the PPS 7, all residents should be protected from unneighbourly extensions. That's stated in policy. Sunlight and daylight are valued elements in good quality living environment. And where an extension is poorly sited or badly designed, that's a problem. Hence the oil tank and this firewall business again. So I'm fully objecting to that condition being presented as okay, because it's not okay for the Kelly family. I ask for change and amendments, particularly to the relocation of the oil tank and the construction of a firewall. Why does it need to happen? And in my humble opinion, it will create quite the monstrosity in front of the kitchen window for the Kelly family. I have also went and visited and been into the house and can see firsthand, and I certainly wouldn't like it myself, so I feel very strongly here today, don't decide to permit and approve it as it stands. And again, all of the other planning history was already outlined, associated with the ground levels and the height and all of that. We cannot possibly permit a scenario where you wouldn't give people the light of day. And if that goes ahead, that's, in my opinion, what would happen. So in conclusion, and again, I talk about the different proposed scheme, the cross sections, and that gives you a better view if it wasn't clear on the day. I do want to ask you all members to please think back to your site meeting. Reflect on what you did observe. What do you think about the proposal now with what you've heard from Sharon and the few maps as well? What is it about the proposed firewall impacts that you think is okay? Because we certainly think as objectors it's not okay. It does not provide a good quality living environment. And I would ask, was that even maybe considered or pointed out? And again, I would ask you to carefully consider about the poor relocation of an oil tank as being not acceptable. So in conclusion, have a reflection on all of that. Please ensure today that there's no unacceptable and adverse effect impacted on the Kelly family. And then I would hope that you would arrive at a decision to ensure the application, at the very least now, would present a solution which is reasonable and not objectionable. And to end, just please give the Kelly family the light of day. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Bernice. Okay, members, thank you very much, ladies. We're going to ask Darren now to make his comments and reply.
Just in relation to the query about the planning policy, the SPPS is obviously the strategic regional policy, and then beneath that you have the addendum to PPS 7, which is residential extensions and alterations. Although it is called residential extensions and alterations, it does say within it that proposals for domestic garage or outbuildings or other built development ancillary to a residential property will also be considered under the provisions of this addendum. So the addendum to PPS 7 is the appropriate policy for the extension and the other works that are on site. In relation to those other works, the same members, for the reason within the report, officers would be of the view that there will be an impact, yes. However, that impact is acceptable. In regards to the planning policy, it doesn't unduly affect the amenity of the neighbouring residents, and that's the test before you. Does it unduly affect the amenity of the neighbouring residents?
Can you just say something about the height?
The height of the yes, I can show you on the drawing, members. So the height, go back to the slides, showing that. Yeah, so that's the if you look at the slide before you, members, at the top, you can see the gate coming in off the car parking area at the back. And you remember, members, you walked in there, and then there was the fairly level area with a bit of a drop, and then you had the steps up near to the house. So that area is going to be regraded. The steps will be moved back, but the levels up in that area will be retained, and the oil tank then will be at existing ground levels. There'll be a black line there on the slide. You can see that there, and that's going to be the new firewall around it, which is a maximum height of 2 meters. And that's the difference in the levels. You can see around the house extension, they'll be reduced down from the red to the green. If I can get this a photograph, members, if I can find. Yeah, so there's the levels at the moment, and you can see, if you recall, the steps there just in the bottom right of the slide. So that area there will all be dug out back towards the rear of the property to create then the new fence. So you can see that'll be dug out, and the levels then will be fairly level with the house. And then you can see the yellow star as the steps up then to gain access out the back to the car parking area. And the land then where the oil tank is will be retained at its existing ground levels.
Okay. Thanks, Darren. Okay, members, have we any thoughts or comments here? Ben?
Here, could I just ask our planning officers, had there been any discussion with the applicant? There seems to be, the objectors have referred to attempts to try and negotiate or whatever. Has there been much discussion around the position of the oil tank? Because it seems that the important thing here is the extension. The oil tanks really should be an aside to the application. But has there been any discussion around the actual location or keeping it in its place? Or is there any particular reason why it's moved to the proposed location, Chair?
So in terms of the applicant's choice of where they wish to put the oil tank, that's their decision. The planners and the council is asked in, is that it's meeting planning policy or not? In this case, officers are of the view that it is acceptable, so there hasn't been any discussions seeking its relocation, nor would we get into those. If it had been unacceptable, then yes, we would have maybe looked and said, is there an alternative position you can put this? But given the position they're proposing is acceptable in terms of the view of officers, there's been no real need to get into that. So that hasn't happened.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, have we any other questions or thoughts? John?
It's the issue of the firewall seems to be the major, and you're saying it can be no more than 2 meters, or it has to be 2 meters?
It's a maximum height of 2 meters.
But given the height, I mean, we're probably talking about, what's there, 5 steps? You're probably talking about 1.10 meters, a meter already above ground level. We're talking of a 3-meter wall there?
No.
Above ground level?
No.
The top of it?
The ground levels that are there is 2 meters above that.
But the house is already 1.1 meters below that ground level, is it not?
Yeah, so just go back to the
Is that not?
slides. You can see there, it's the critical issue here, members, is the existing ground levels where the oil tank is proposed is to be retained, so there's no change. So the wall that is to be erected around the oil tank is a maximum of 2 metres above those existing ground levels. So the ground levels to the top of the wall, 2 metres. The issue here is the proximity to the neighbours, because you can see obviously they're at a different level.
Yeah, that's
So
basically
the
where I'm
ground
coming
level
from.
is
So you
different.
could end up with a wall over
No,
3
no,
metres
the wall,
above their property,
no, the
their
wall,
their
the
ground
wall-
level.
Just to be clear, members, the wall will be 2 metres high on the top of the existing ground level. So from the neighbour's property, looking at that wall, it will be 2 metres. The issue is that that wall will be at a higher level than the neighbouring property. Won't be any higher than 2 metres though.
Yeah, but from their ground level where they're standing on the floor,
Yes,
from their floor, it could be 3 metres.
it could be. Yes, it could be about that. That's, I think, the drawings say the cross-section drawing that the applicants provided. It gives you an indication of approximately, and I don't think it's an unfair representation of the difference in levels of what the proximity to the neighbouring property will be. So the yellow star is the path that we walked along into the doorway, and then you can see on the left is the fence line, and then the wall, the firewall. Now, the critical thing, members, is that firewall is not along the entire length. If I can go back to the, sorry, I'm jumping through these, members. So the previous appeal was on the site. You can see there on the left-hand slide. So the previous application for a single-story dwelling, there was a wall along the entire length beside the neighbour's property. You can see that on the slide there. So the red line beside number 78, there would have been the gable or the side wall of a house with a roof above it. In this case, we don't have that. We only have the oil tank then, and the wall will go around it, and then you have the existing shed. So there is a difference to the previous appeal, plus the appeal related to a building with a roof on it. This is not. This is just 2 metre high wall with nothing on top of it. So there is a difference between the previous appeal and this one, and that is important to take into account.
Okay. Happy enough, John?
No, I'm not. I don't know whether I'm clear or not, but it sounds very tall to me.
Okay. Robert?
Mr. Query, what's there at present, Aaron?
Sorry?
What's the height of the structure there at present between the two properties?
Along that boundary, if I go back to the slide, you can see then the shed, location of the shed, and then behind it then is the landscape and the plants that are there.
Yeah.
So there's nothing, there's no buildings.
What's the height of what's the height to the top of the shrubs, the plants?
Oh, I don't know, because I never measured it. Don't know.
That's approximately where the oil tank will be repositioned to, isn't
It's
it?
going to be in there, yes, but as I said, the shed, the garden shed, is around 2 metres, I'd say. It'll be reasonable to take that as an indicative sort of height. So the landscaping will be removed, and the new wall will go in there.
So I think what Councillor McClockery is trying to get at, if the permission is granted and the oil tank is positioned on a fire break wall, it will top out at 2 metres on the upper level.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're standing in the Kelly property, I think we need a comparator basically as to the height of the obstruction currently there and the height of the obstruction if the permission was granted to the neighbours.
Say, members, that as part of the planning application, that's not a required drawing because we have all that information there.
Yeah.
There's an element of judgment, a degree of judgment to be made here. Site visit and also from the plans before you. And as I say, members, I don't think the cross-section plan provided by the neighbours is an unfair representation. I think it is a good indication of what will happen on the ground. Planning officers, the council don't need a drawing showing that because we know exactly what is before us. But that is a useful guide. The question then is whether you think that the wall will unduly affect the privacy and amenity of the neighbouring residents. That's the question you have to determine today based upon the information before you, and you may take a different view to officers. That's part of the process.
That's okay, thank you.
Tommy?
Carly, thank you, Chair. slightly confused. The drawing that's on there now, Darren, that's one that the objectors have presented. Now, in the previous application at number 74, I believe in that application, yourselves present us with similar drawings showing the angle of the sun, etc., and how it would impact. Sorry, could you tease that out? Why were we not presented with that? Because obviously loss of amenity is very relevant to this application.
The drawings of members referring to previously are, I imagine, a bird's eye view, and the dotted lines come out from the windows. That doesn't really apply in this instance. What's the issue before you is the difference in levels. So you need a side view looking in, like a slice through the ground, like a cross section, which is what you have before you. So these weren't on the other applications because they weren't relevant. The ground levels were the same.
Okay, all right.
And just another question then, Darren. If we deemed it possible, could we suggest a relocation of that oil tank as part of a condition?
Yeah. Well, the choices before you members today are you can agree with the officer's recommendation and go forward as approval, or you can disagree with the officer's recommendation and refuse planning permission, or you can defer the application for officers to go back and discuss with the applicant whether they will remove it and amend it, or whether they're willing to change it and bring that back before you at another meeting.
Okay. Mary?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for that, Darren. Yes, my question would have been before your summary there is that if we didn't accept the oil tank and the firewall as councillors, what would our options be? And I think Sharon and both Bernice in their presentation made it quite clear that they didn't stand in the way of the developments that are required maybe in the neighbouring house, but they want to have an agreement between all parties. And I think, I don't know who the agent is, but you kind of indicated that the agent wasn't asked to have different places for the oil tank, so therefore didn't come forward with other ideas because it is deemed by officers that it was acceptable, which is fair enough. I think, judging by the tone of the room, I don't think everybody would agree with that, with officers' take on that. So therefore, I would suggest perhaps we defer this so that the officers could go back to the agent and feed in what may have been picked up here. I don't think it would be acceptable and see could it be maybe relocated and then have all parties seen to it in the long run, because I don't think there's any malice here, but just coming to an agreement. That would be my suggestion, Chair, if members are agreeable. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. John?
Thanks, Chair. I will second Councillor Garrity's proposal that we defer this. The cross-section that the Sharon has submitted, we know is 2 metres above the existing ground level. We believe that there is the amenity will be affected by that, and for to be regraded, for the extension, the rest of the garden, I wonder, can that section be lowered a bit just to relieve and give extra light and amenity to the Kellys? We have no objection against the development. It is needed, but everybody, I think an agreed way forward between everybody is acceptable in this instance. So I'm happy to second.
Okay, thanks, John. Aaron?
Thank you very much, Chair. A very interesting debate, and can I thank the two ladies for presenting to us as well. I suppose most of us were on the site visit as well, and we know the issues there. I'm prepared to support Councillor Garrity's proposal that we defer, and it's better to reach a consensus, especially between neighbours, and hopefully the agent will come up with the reasons for the consensus as well, and I'm happy enough to defer at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Harold. And Robert?
Yeah, I think issues with regard to close proximity are always a problem, and I think it was very useful for the planning members on a rare occasion, as we normally do, to go out actually and see the issues on site. And whilst it might appear small in the bigger picture. It's actually not small for the people involved. That's the applicant and the adjoining neighbours through Sharon here. I did raise the issue on site, Darren, in regard to the garden shed as well. I think there is an issue that's not fully explained by the agent on behalf of the applicant with regard to how they're actually treating both the wooden shed and the tank. And it may be a case that that's a combination that needs to be looked at, because if the applicant, and I know we're getting into a lot of detail here, but it's fundamental actually, both to the applicant and to the adjoining neighbours. There's going to be a lot of excavation out the back, and why they actually can't excavate quite a lot and lower everything to the lower level, it would actually then take away a lot of the issues, I think, that Sharon has outlined on behalf of her parents. So I would actually ask you to look at that issue tied together, the boiler position and the garden shed. And I think if that was looked at, I have a funny feeling the applicant would get it sorted out and get it dealt with fairly quickly. And it would, I believe, without putting words in the mouth of Sharon, actually reach a resolution that's acceptable to parents. Thank you.
Okay, I'm
supporting it.
Yes, and I'm sensing agreement here. So, Tommy?
Again, just to come back to support what Robert has said, I think maybe, and I'm sure the planners will take from this decision, that it is the full light availability on that new area. I don't know how much regulation we put in it, but as Robert says, the shed and that also would need to be considered, maybe, which could be resolved with the two parties and the planners.
Look, that's the contentious piece there right beside the windows. So we have agreed, all members. Alan, you're indicating?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chair. Happy to support Robert and Tommy and to support the overall resolution. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. So members all agreed that we defer this back. Can this be turned around and brought back to us next month?
Members, if the amended plans come in, they'll have to be re-neighbour notified. That'll take 2 weeks. So if the agent does supply those and they come in time to get that, then yes, we can come before you, but we have
because
to.
I do appreciate this has been rumbling along for ever so long. So sooner the better that we can get this teased out and finally sorted out for everybody concerned so that lives can move on. Okay, thank you very much, ladies. Okay, we're going to move on to application number 2, and that's 2021.
Okay, members, so application 2, LA
54, sorry.
LA 10 2021 1254 is a DCA Suffolk members, which is a demolition consent in a conservation area application, and it's for the part demolition of a stone wall to provide a pedestrian gateway at the rear of 65 Main Street, Lisnaskea, and the applicant then is MK. The recommendation is to approve demolition consent for the reasons listed within the report. So members, on the screen then is the site location plan. This plan is quite difficult to make out, members, I'm sure, but the red line does encompass the property at the front and the site at the back. And that's an image then of the property itself then on the right-hand side on the main street. So just more detail then. So you have number 65 on the slide on the left. And you can see the existing property is a road frontage property along the main street. Out the back then there's a yard and then there's a shed with a light grey roof with ivy growing over it. And that's the property then that's linked to the main house by a wall. So you can see number 65, the main house at the top of the slide then, and the building at the back of the yard, and the wall then running along the side. So you can see that's clearly shown on the plan. And that's the wall that's subject to this application. The proposal then is to cut a hole in the wall. And as you can see, members, some of the works have already taken place and the wall has been removed, partly removed. So this application is really retrospective, seeking for the consent to carry out the works. That's with the view out then from the site towards the other properties and links through then to vehicle access and beyond the just beside where the steel gate is there. So prior to any works, the wall looked like the top slide, and then the proposal is for the bottom element. So you can see the top slide northwest elevation was the original condition of the wall, and the proposal then is to demolish the wall to provide a pedestrian gateway. Now the image then at the bottom is what the gateway will look like. Again, a slide on the left then shows the wall prior to the works. So you can see the building at the back of the yard with the wall along the side. And the proposal then is to cut a hole and put a gateway through it. So consent is needed to demolish that part of the wall. So the recommendation then, members, is to approve the consent, subject to the reasons in the report. There's no conditions required, as the demolition consent is only for the element on the drawings, and the rest of the works then will have to be tidied up and fixed up in accordance with the approved plans, because demolition consent has not been granted for those. So it's purely to cut the hole to create the pedestrian access.
Okay. Thanks, Darren. Now we have representation by Martin Carey. Martin, can you hear us?
Chair, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Martin. You have 10 minutes, Martin.
Good afternoon, councillors. I suppose maybe just a couple of small points for to make. First of all, towards the demolition of the wall, it's not total demolition of the wall. Part of the wall, as shown by some of your photographs there, is already, part of the wall is already down, and this was due to an unstable part of the wall that we took down for health and safety to some of the local residents that are in 65 and 63. Both of those properties which I own, so it's an old stone wall between the two properties, and I own both of the properties. The intention is to rebuild the wall sympathetic to DFC historic buildings and historic monuments. So we're totally aligned with their line of thought as to regards and sympathetic towards historic monuments. So it's just basically to point out that it will be rebuilt with the gateway access, which provide additional health and safety to the surrounding area and to the occupants. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Martin. Have we any questions, members? No. Paul?
Martin, was there a bat study done on that wall before it was touched? I believe the bats were in that wall years ago, as far as my information is told.
Okay, Martin?
Can you give me that again?
Yeah.
Bat survey.
A bat survey done on the wall? No bat survey carried out on the wall. The wall was basically in a bad shape and fallen over, and said from the roof there was ivy sort of clinging onto it, so it was literally held up by the ivy.
Okay. No other questions here, members. We're going to Tommy.
Margaret Carney, thanks, Chair. Just a question, Martin, just for reassurance. On the photograph, the amount of wall that's down seemed to be fairly wide, and I see within the recommendations there, there's just reassurance from yourself that it is this pedestrian access only that will be the completed.
That's correct. That's correct, Councillor.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay. I have no other indications or questions, so thank you, Martin. And we're going to move on to a representation by Gregory Burney in objection to the application. And you have 5 minutes, Gregory. So can you hear us?
Yes. Hello, Councillor.
Okay, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman and Council. As you know, my name is Gregory Burney, and I own the property at 61 Main Street. I am here to represent Barry McCormick, Valerie Irwin, Campbell Murphy, and of course myself, who are all neighbours in that area. Regarding the tossing of the wall and pedestrian walkway, the work having already been done, regardless of any planning. The wall having already been knocked down. This wall is within the conservation area. Maybe you can tell me, is this wall part of a listed building or structure? An enforcement case has been considered to rebuild the wall, yet the wall still has not been rebuilt. This wall provided security for the back of our properties. It left only one way to get to the back of these houses, and that was by the way of this entry, which is 24-hour security cameras operating. If access is provided through this wall, this will leave the older residents feeling very vulnerable about how safe they are in their own houses. During the work that has been done, the applicant and the builders have damaged the side of the resident with a dumper and is refusing to fix the damage. Police have spoken to the applicant and we await the outcome. On another occasion, the applicant parked his vehicle in the yard of 61 Main Street, blocking the resident from getting out of his own yard. After 24 hours had gone by, he still refused to move the said vehicle, at which stage the police were informed. Police took the applicant down to the yard and made him remove the vehicle. This is causing great concern for the neighbours and makes everyone feel that their space and rights are being infringed without any protection from the authorities. The applicant has no right of way over 57, 59 or 61 Main Street to gain access to 65 Main Street. He has damaged a number of properties since he started to work on this property. I hope you appreciate our deep concerns over this matter and would ask you to consider not approving this application due to the detrimental impact on the neighbours, which of course is a key planning matter and concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gregory. Have we any questions, members? Robert?
Thanks, Gregory. Robert Irvine here. You've mentioned, Gregory, that in your opinion, the applicant, Mr. Carey, has no right of way onto the rear access. Could you elaborate on that? Because it's not really made clear from the application. None of the plans actually show the periphery or the external area. It just basically shows the buildings. So maybe that's an issue that we need to deal with. It would appear there's an entry down between 55 and 57. Is that the only access point?
That's correct. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, that Samsung wall is 2.5 and 3 foot wide, 10, 12 foot high. It was in good structure for it being knocked down. That there would have been the end of the right of way. The right of way would have stopped. If anything, if there was a right of way, there's nothing legally said there's right of way to any of them properties, in anybody's deed, but it would have stopped at that wall. But hence, the wall being tossed now is an extension of the right of way, which I don't think, being the advice I sought legally, is legal.
Yeah, that's something, Gregory, we're going to have to clarify with the planning officer, but it's just to get the information from yourself. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions. Tommy?
Carly, thanks, Chair. And just a question for Mr. Burney. You indicated in your submission, Mr. Burney, that this wall was of sound building. Had you access to this wall to check the stability of the wall? Further information we've received indicated there was a health and safety issue. Just if you could clarify that for me, please, Chair.
Yes, that wall, as I say, I own my property for the last 16 years. That wall is of sound structure. As I say, 10, 12 foot high, 2.5, 3 foot wide, sandstone wall. As I'm aware, it's part of within the conservation area. The wall, a dozer wouldn't have touched the wall. I seen the stuff that came out of it. There was a lot of work put into tossing the wall, and it didn't fall by itself. in my opinion.
Okay, John?
Obviously, Mr. Carey would own the enclosed area, so the outer area of the wall, you're saying that doesn't belong to him, so if they're coming out through the door where this proposed, where exactly are you going when you come out of there?
Yes, the applicant does own both sides of the wall, but within 3 or 4 foot, then he is into my property at 61.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no other questions. Thank you, Gregor. I'm going to move on to Tom Elliott. Tom, are you there?
Chair, can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you. You have 5 minutes, Tom, so the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman and councillors. I've been asked to make representation by a number of the neighbours to this wall and to the property. As we're aware, it's in a conservation area. Probably that has been there for generations, and there's no great detail as to how it would improve the conservation area. I do note on the portal, Chairman and councillors, that there was one consultation issued on this to HED, Historic Environment Division, but there is no response on the portal from HED. And I'm just obviously when I heard the applicant talk there about the structure of the wall being unsound, I'm wondering, was there any structural report carried out or any assessment carried out on the wall, or was environmental health consulted on it? Because I don't see any consultation sent to environmental health by planning service. I further note, Chair, that there's another planning case referred to within the detail of this, and that is LA 10 2019-0151 CA. I'm guessing maybe that's an enforcement case, but I don't know, Chair, because it's not on the portal and I haven't got access to it. And I don't know whether you, Chair, or the other councillors have access to it, but that may have information maybe that's relative to this application. So it may be useful for us all to have a look at that application before we proceed any further. In the report today, it is noted that work has commenced on this wall and that it's to provide pedestrian access. But as has already been noted, I don't believe the applicant has any pedestrian access beyond his own property there. So I'm just wondering where the pedestrian access would go to then. If there is no point in it, I can see him wanting it to go onto his own property there next door. So potentially that is it. But again, that's an issue that maybe can be clarified. Also, some clarification on the list of buildings. The planner's report indicates that numbers 55 and 67 are of special architecture and historic importance. The Department for the Environment publication, the Liston Ski Conservation Area, I note that number 67 and 69 are listed buildings, as well as numbers 47 to 55. All of those were in close proximity to this application, and all of which may have an impact to the application in itself, Chair. So I'm just urging maybe a bit of caution in this one, particularly in regards to that other application 2019-0151. That's 3 years old and there doesn't seem to be any conclusion to it. So it might be useful for us all to have a look at that and maybe have an assessment around that, and in particular, you know, this issue of this being a pedestrian access, but there's nowhere really to go, Chair. That's all. So that's my presentation, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Okay, I'm going to ask Darren then to comment.
Okay, members, just to try and tie up some of those issues. You'll note from the report, it does take into account the proximity to the listed buildings, 55 and 67, which are grade B1 listed buildings. So the wall is not listed. So it doesn't need listed building consent. It is in a conservation area, and the works to the wall require conservation area consent, which is why we're here today. In terms of the CA planning reference number with the CA at the end of it, that's the enforcement file. So that's not a publicly available file. There's nothing on it that's of relevance or material to this application. You have everything before you that's relevant to it, and there's no additional information being withheld or kept back. The application for the DCA is recommended for approval based on the information in the report and all of the information on the planning portal. In terms of consultees, really there's no need to consult with anybody, for example, environmental health. There's no requirement to carry out a structural survey on any of that information. It's not necessary as part of this application. What is necessary is to consider it against the planning policy, and that's set out in the report. In terms then of the, what other issues were there? The rights of way, that's an important one, members. In terms of your applications you have before you, you'll be familiar with the requirement to have regard to material considerations. Those are planning material considerations. You can't go beyond that and look at issues which are not planning material considerations. One of those would be private rights of way. That's not relevant to you today at all. A public right of way would be if there was an issue there, but there's no public rights of way. Having identified the rights of way appear to be private. That's a civil matter between the relevant parties. So any issues about access, pedestrian access over other people's lands, etc., not relevant to this DCA, and I would urge you to stay away from that, members, because it's not a material consideration for you. What is material is the application to partly demolish the wall for the proposal shown in the plans, and that shows the gate. We just go back to it, so you can see that is what is before you. So although works have taken place on site, that is what you're considering today. So you'll have a gap with a pedestrian access in it. If you approve this application, that's what will be permitted.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Robert.
So, Chair, Tom, I'm listening to what you say, Darren, and I do agree with you. And I'm going to caveat it with a but. I believe there are issues that need to be actually seen on the ground. And from my point of view, what you've actually provided today in regard to visibility, I mean all-round visibility, is not enough for me to adequately decide one way or the other in regard to this application coming forward. And it's tied into the next one as well. And my proposal is that we defer this application and that we arrange a site meeting. It's not something I do normally, but I think from our previous application, the intricacies around an application in close proximity to other properties can have a direct bearing if you can actually see it in the flesh and actually can talk out and talk through some of the issues. So I think that's why it's essential for this, and that's my proposal, a deferment to arrange a site visit, and we'll arrange a site visit, and then we can come back actually. And part of the revisiting, we need visibility, in other words, photographs at the back and around. So that's my proposal.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. Mary?
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, I think as Mr. Carey said, the wall was unsafe, health and safety issues, and then Mr. Burney said that the wall was sound. The report's excellent, but for me, I wouldn't be content until I've seen more myself. There's 15 objections and 1 and 18 in the corresponding next item, application 3. And I think for us to make sound decisions, I think we'd all best take a look at it and make our own minds up. So I would second the site visit because I think that's needed in this case. I think we had 1 objection in the last application, and to have, what's that, 33, I think it warrants a site visit. And then I'll be attending all in well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Tommy?
Where am I going to carry? Well, I was coming in to propose the recommendation that's in front of us, and I've listened to the objectors today, and as Darren has outlined to me, and I've seen it within the report, the wall's not listed. The question of whether it was unsafe or not is immaterial at this stage. There's a gap in the wall. So the planning application is to tidy that up and make a pedestrian access, and I'm quite happy to recommend the proposal that's in front of us. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Tommy. Paul?
You, Chair. I go with Councillor Evans' proposal. I support Councillor Evans' proposal.
Thanks, Paul. Anthony?
Chair, no, I'll second Councillor Maguire's proposal.
Okay. And I haven't any other speakers, so I'm going to take Robert's proposal. And I'm looking for a show of hands on that proposal. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Count me in, Chair.
And that's 8. Those against? 1, 2, 3. And I'm not seeing anything else.
Count me in as well. Count me in there too. Thank you, Chair.
There you go. Is 4. Okay, 8, 4. So it looks like we're going to a site visit there. And we
The accompanying application then is LA 10 2021 1251, and it's a full application at the same site, members, and the details are on the screen. The recommendation is before you to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 3 conditions. Given the comments on the previous application, members, I'll open the floor.
Robert?
Yeah, as part of this application is about the pedestrian gateway. It's tied into the previous application, so I think we need to defer this one as well, and tie the 2 of them into a site visit.
You're proposing that?
I'm proposing that as well. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Aaron?
I'll second Councillor Irvine's proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, okay. Can Tommy, you're still holding the line?
I'm holding the line in that there's this is a break with normal procedure. An application is usually presented by Darren and then we make a decision on the way forward. Am I not correct?
The last application for the extension, Councillors, was requested early on, so we didn't present the application and didn't go through the details. We went straight to the request for the site visit. So that has happened before.
Okay. So on this application, we're going to stay for the site maintenance on this one as well?
Yes, if you want, I can go through it, members, but I think...
Oh, no, quite happy to move it on, but...
Okay.
Chair, just for point of clarity, I think if we listen back to the tape, it was actually incorporated in Robert's original proposal. I kind of came in just to clarify that at the start of it, but we've all agreed now, I think. So.
Okay, so we're agreed then that the 2 applications come in under this and benefit from the site visit, yeah? Okay, members? Excellent. And we're moving on then to application number 4, and that, who? Josephine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, could I propose a 10-minute comfort break?
Sounds like a reasonable suggestion to me. 4 o'clock resume then, members. Thank you. You're seconded. I do forget that I am in the right. So we're all agreed with me. That's excellent. items 2 and 3, which were interlinked, and they were at the rear of 65 Main Street, Lissaski. We're moving on to item number 4, and that is application 0384, proposed two-story dwelling on a farm under CTY 10. Aaron?
Okay, members. So application 4 then, LA 10 2022-0384. It's an outline application by B. McCartan for a proposed two-story dwelling on a farm with the relevant policy included in the description, CTY 10. The location then is 100 metres southwest of 87 Arvely Road in Omagh. And the recommendation then by officers is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 4 reasons. So I'll just take you through the details, members. On the screen then is the farm maps. So there's 2 maps. That's the first one. And then that's the second one, which shows the farmlands in and around the farm group. And the site then is on the field identified with the red arrow. In terms of the proposal itself, it's on an active and established farm with no development opportunities sold off, so it meets those 2 policy tests. However, the critical issue, though, is that the site is not visually linked with the farm group, which is 80 metres, approximately 80 metres to the east. And it has not been demonstrated that the site is an exception to the policy to allow location away from the farm group. A case has been made that the alternative site or the site away from the farm group is required because it's a working farm with a cattle shed. And you can see on the screen there the location of the cattle shed identified by the applicant. That does house animals, and officers have visited that to confirm that. The critical issue, though, members, is that the applicant's proposed site doesn't meet the policy test before it, and that it's not visually linked and clustered, and will also create further development opportunities. You can see within the area outlined in blue that there are extensive lands under the control of the applicant, and the officer's view is that there's alternative sites. There are a number of alternative sites that would be suitable and would meet policy tests. So the recommendation then, as I say, is those critical issues. So I'll just take you through some more details. That's an aerial photograph then, looking down on top of the site, and you can see it in red there, with the field then to the right and the farm group then beside it. So there's approximately 50 metres of a separation with the boundary to the farm group, and then obviously the new house would be further in the site, so there'd be an increased separation. There are 2 other properties then in close proximity to the farm, so those are shown on the screen. You can see they're about 30 metres away from the working farm, in contrast to our site, which is over 50. And as I say, when the house is moved in the location in the boundary of the site, it'll be further away. Critical views then, members. So if we are down at the red arrow, if you can see in the bottom right of the slide, you're standing looking at the road, looking in, you can see the laneway then that goes in and serves the farm and the houses. So that's the view then, looking in off the public road, taken from Google Street View. And you can see the small paddock and then the laneway to the right-hand side. And the existing house then is well screened and integrated by the mature trees and the farm group then behind it. Another view then, members. So if you just go down the road slightly and look to the left, into the front paddock where the red arrows indicating. So that's the approximate view you'll get there again from Google Street View. So you're looking in between the trees into the paddock there, or the field there, with the farm shed at the back. You can see that grey building at the back. You then go on down towards the edge of the site and turn around and look back towards the farm group. So if you're at the road looking into the field, that's the view there. And you can see then the farm group there and the other buildings in the area, and the trees along the road. So our site then is in the field to the left, on the other side of that hedge line. So if you're standing on the road looking at the corner of our site, that's the view there. You can see the roadside boundary and then the fence line along the right-hand side going into the field in front of that brown cow, and our site is on the other side of that hedge. So as I say, members, the farm group then has established buildings on it and meets the policy tests there for grouping, and there are 2 houses there already. There's a number of alternative sites there which officers would be willing to meet and work with the applicant to identify a suitable site that met everybody's needs and met the policy tests. An amended plan has come in from the agent, and that's on the screen, members, which shows the site reduced down with the access coming in from the field boundary, and then the house at the back of the site with a gap between the curtilage of the house and the road, and that's in an effort to overcome the issues about ribbon development. However, that has not been accompanied by application forms, etc., so it has not been advertised or neighbour notified, and it doesn't really overcome the issues anyway, members. So what's before you is the original application. So the recommendation then, members, is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report, and subject to the 4 reasons. So it's contrary to CTY 10, it's not visually linked with the farm group, and there's no demonstrable health and safety reasons or verifiable plans to expand the business to justify the location. Contrary to CTY 8 and 14, in that it would result in the creation of a ribbon development and would cause detrimental change or erode the rural character of the area by reason of a build-up. And again, the same policies in that it would create a substantial and continuously built-up frontage, allowing for further development opportunities and as an exception to the policy. And finally, then CTY 1 members, it's not one of the range of types of development which in principle are considered to be acceptable in the countryside and will contribute to the aims of sustainable development.
Very much, Darren. We have representation now by Les Ross, and we also have Bert Wilson in support of the application. So you're both very welcome to the Planning Committee this afternoon. And Les, you have 10 minutes. So if you want to take the floor.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Hopefully I'm coming across loud and clear there.
You are indeed.
Good. Yes, thank you very much. Hopefully this is a fairly straightforward case. There's no dispute here that there's an active farm. No opportunities have been sold off the farm, and it's agreed that a new dwelling is acceptable in principle under the 10-year rule. The farm's owned by Paul McCartan, and the site is for his son. The family wish to develop at this site because they deem it to the best place on the holding for a house. And that's in terms of the access opportunities. There's a small crest on the road, and for that reason, this is one of the only places in the immediate frontage where the visibility space can be created. Secondly, in terms of services, the site's close to the road. That's handy for electricity, for water, for broadband to connect in. In terms of the relationship with the farm activities, it's considered to be a good place in terms of the farm business because it's not too close to those animal sheds, the cattle shed that you saw. And finally, the site's relatively low-lying, which means it's a well-integrated site. It's low-lying compared to the road and the surrounding landscape, and there are good strong hedges around the site and around the fields in that location, which help create a good sense of enclosure and they limit the public views in. In other words, in practical terms, it's a good place for the house, and the family has long earmarked this as such for a house. The planning officer's report largely agrees with that analysis. It's very important to note that the case officer considers the sites acceptable in terms of CTY 13 and CTY 14, and that's explicit in the case officer's report in front of you. So the reason of refusal refers to the 2 issues that Darren has highlighted. Firstly, the potential to create a gap. In other words, the idea that if you place a building here, you artificially create a gap site. So the family has no intention of creating a gap site, and we have sought to resolve that matter, as Darren showed, by changing the red line to set that site back off the road and ensure that there's no opportunity for a gap to be created. As you know, this committee is very well aware of CTY 8, the gap site policy, and it requires a substantial built-up frontage. Now, the existing farm isn't on the frontage either, to the east. So there really isn't an opportunity to create a gap site here anyway, but to reinforce that, we're suggesting the red line could be altered and make sure that house and the curtilage is set back and there's no substantial frontage being created here. The second thing, so I think really, members, what I'm saying is that issue can be addressed either through the existing red line or through an amendment to the red line, and I hope you can consider that for me, please. The second issue is this, the linkage to the farm buildings. And as you know, CTY 10 requires a new house to either be visually linked to the farm group or be clustered with the farm group. So that means there's a fair degree of flexibility in the policy. As you know, the house does not need to be beside the farm buildings. The policy requirement is that there should be a visual linkage between the two. The planning officer in the case officer report highlights this concern that there's a physical separation between the site and the farm buildings. I totally accept that. But in terms of policy, that's absolutely fine, because there's a definite sense of a visual connection or visual linkage when you're viewing the site and the farm buildings from the roadside, and that's because the cattle sheds and the house that are existing sort of wrap around in the northwestern side, and they're relatively visual, and you can get that sense of linkage then when you're standing on the road and through the hedge towards the two. We already know that the site's well integrated because the planning officer agrees with that and that it's acceptable in CTY 13 and 14 terms. And there's no doubt that there's a visual linkage between the site and the established farm buildings. So in my view, the CTY 10 test is met. In summary, the infill issue is and can be resolved by ensuring the site does not create a frontage. I don't think there's a question about that. And therefore, if the committee agrees that there's a visual linkage between the site and the farm buildings, then this application can and should be approved in my view. So finally, just on behalf of the McCartan family, I respectfully ask the committee considers these issues and approves the application. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Les. Any questions, members? Gary?
Thank you, Chair. Just one to Les, if he doesn't mind. The planning officer alluded to several sites that were available on the Holden that could hold a house for the applicants here. Did Les, is he aware of all of those options, and were they presented to the applicant to give a choice? Just as a question, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. Yeah, there are a variety of options here. That's true. And I think it goes back to something I was saying earlier on. I've explored this with the applicant family, why do you want this site? And they've explained to me in practical terms why this is the best site in the farm. The field that's right beside the cattle shed there, that's the ideal place. If they were expanding the farm operation, they would expand out into that field, and they don't want to fetter the opportunity to do that in future. Now, there are no verifiable plans to do anything there, but they just don't want to tie their hands in those terms. So that's on the western side of the farm buildings. They don't want to build in there. On the eastern side, there would be opportunities there. A little bit tricky maybe in terms of access, and it's just not as sort of good a site in terms of integration and some other. I think, Councillor, it's some of these issues you can't really put your finger on, but in terms of practically the best site, the most attractive site on the farm, the one that's been proposed is it, and that's why the family's going for that. And if it meets the policy, if it's visually linked to the farm buildings, why shouldn't it be approved when it's the most desirable site for the family?
Okay, thanks, Les. Barry?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I have to say, when I was seeing the maps there and the illustrations, I was struck by the point that Les is making, that although there's a degree of separation, there most definitely is a visual connection, a visual link. To me, it was quite obvious. It was a good example of visual link, the way I saw it. So I suppose my question would be, it seems to be, Les, that there is a fear on the part of our planning colleagues that you might return in the future with future applications. So you've suggested you're going to mitigate against that. You said infill can be resolved. by making sure that no frontage is created. Can you do that within this existing application? Can you make those moves, within the existing application?
Thank you, councillor. Yes, I believe I can, because the red line, there's usually no problem with reducing a red line during a planning application process. It's usually more complicated to expand a red line. So I think that in principle, and Darren can rule on this, but that Darren would be happy if we reduced the red line. Whether it's necessary or not is another point, but we would be more than happy to do that if Darren was.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Robert?
Yeah, thanks very much. Les, I know what you're trying to do is trying to work around the stated intentions of the applicant, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. Our job on the planning committee is to actually interrogate policy and just see whether applications line up to policy. This one probably is on the fringe of that, and that's down to our deliberation and talking. But I believe there is still mileage probably in further discussing with our officers alternatives, because looking at it even now, and I've seen it before, there could be alternatives, because basically what you're coming with, on my first glance, it's unintentional, but you will create opportunities for additional gap sites or ribbon. And whilst you would say that that is not the intention of the applicant, and they have no intention of exploiting that, we can't guarantee that as a committee, and neither can our planning officers. If an approval is granted, and it then turns out under any future policies that gaps are created and can be exploited, there will be. So my object obviously is trying to fulfill the desire of the applicant, but also to mitigate against any intrusions into policy. So that's just a few comments. Thanks very much. You don't have to reply.
Okay.
Chairman, may I reply to that?
Okay, if you wish.
Yeah, look, councillor, I totally accept the point, that's why we've come up with this idea of reducing the red line to ensure that the residential curtilage doesn't extend out onto the road, and that seems to meet the sort of the twin objectives: one of meeting the policy and making sure that we don't unintentionally create that gap, and two, getting the best site for the applicant. So I think that works in practical terms and policy terms. And I'd also just draw, and the reason I wanted to just respond was I just draw your attention to the existing farm, and this is just to the east, where the farm building actually is, and the houses. That doesn't really have a frontage onto the road itself, and I don't think it would count towards sort of that substantial frontage which CTY8 talks about. I don't think that in any event you would create a gap, on that side, and maybe that gives you a little bit more comfort, councillor and committee. Thank you.
Okay, that seems to conclude the questions or comments. So I'm going to move on to Councillor Bert Wilson. And Bert, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, Chair, can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the stuff that Les has, but actually it is an established and active farm, and business and all the rest is 100%. And no sites have been sold off in the past 10 years. There's no third party. Oh shit! There's no third party objections to. Sorry about that. To the siting. As well as that, the planners state here, I didn't measure it, but I was down and looked at it, that it's 80 metres away from the present farmyard. Well, now to me, 80 metres is not a great distance. One thing it does say that it's not visually linked. Well, it is there is a mass. It would be visibly linked if there wasn't a massive hedge there, and the applicant had spoken to me that he was happy to either cut that hedge down or remove it, and that would leave it that it would be visibly linked. So you know, it's one of the best sites I have seen. As well as that, if he moved any closer to the farmyard, as the architect says, as Les says, it would restrict expansion in the farmyard or farm in future, and nobody knows what future with farming that the applicant would have to do. The field in front of the house that talked about moving the site to, well, that is, in my opinion, a 3 acres field, and to put a house in the middle of that, and you couldn't put it near the dwelling house anyway. It would desecrate that, which is, in my humble opinion as a farmer, a really good site, or a really good field, sorry, that he is using for his stock on it and all the rest. Planners did suggest as well, and then that they use the existing lane if they did that. But there are already 2 families using that lane, and to me that would be unreasonable for to ask that 3 families would be using the 1 lane. As well as that, if the applicant did happen to need a mortgage, it would really rule out any possibility of getting a mortgage. So it does not harm the amenities of any other dwellings in the area. I believe that the site that it is the best site on the farm. I have seen it, visited it, and that, and I believe if they moved the hedge, which he would be quite entitled to do there if he wanted to, or at least cut it down, it would be then visibly linked with the existing farmyard. And it's really, he did deliberately, and he indicated to me that he would move it where as far back as need be, so that it wouldn't be classed as a gaps or part of a gap site application again. And the visibility displays are in his ownership as well. So whatever needs to be done there can be done, and the applicant is very agreeable to go down that lane. But I believe that it will be visibly, it could be visibly linked with the existing farmyard, and that it is in close proximity. So I have no hesitation in asking the committee to grant this site an approval. It is, if you were on the ground and seen it, and as I say, with the been put to move that hedge and that, it really takes away that other objection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bert. And I'm going to move to Darren now for his comments.
Okay, members, really, in terms of the CTY 10 policy, the critical issue, members, is whether there's an appreciation of any physical separation between the site of the new house and the farm group. And as a view of officers, and I've visited the site as well, and yeah, I agree with the officers, there is a separation here, and really you wouldn't know that the new house is part of that farm group because of that separation. The hedge is not really critical to that. There is a good hedge between them all. It's the distance between the two that gets that sense of physical separation. As I say, members, this is one of those applications where there are alternatives that planners could work with the applicant and find a solution to this that would meet policy, and we're very willing to do that if members wish to go down that road.
Okay. Members, thoughts and comments?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Look, I think the issue basically is the separation. There's nothing with regard to actually granting an application on the farm. We would like to do it. I appreciate what Les has tried to do in regard to amending and talking about just a lane access onto the Arvally Road, so that trying to overcome any future issues with regard to gap site. But the way our policy is going, that will actually create a gap on the western side, inadvertently, whether they want to or not, in my opinion, and it'll be open to policy for an application. I think the exploration of additional sites, I don't think has actually taken place properly. And it needs to take place, because visually, even myself looking at it now, there are a couple of options that would actually read an awful lot better with the existing farm group, would still give individual access, not shared lane access, and wouldn't actually lose as much of the agricultural land as proposed here, and would better sit within policy. And in that case, I would propose that, and I'm going to ask Darren for direction, if we defer this back, can discussions take place with regard to alternatives because of the red line issue? And if they can't, then obviously we would have to collapse the application. But my proposal is to defer it back so that proper discussions take place, so we get an application that is compliant with policy, because I'm too well aware that we're out with the policy here, and we're trying to squeeze it back into policy, and that's not what we should be doing as a committee. I want to help the applicant, but I think we need to look at this properly. So that's my proposal, Chair. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, just to confirm to members that in situations, I guess, where somebody has their foot in the door in terms of the policy, it's just purely a siting issue. We've had a few of these, and in all cases, we've been able to agree an alternative site. And I remind members, one of them, the agent, even said it's a better site than the one they applied for. So we can and we will work on this. We planners, are much like yourselves, we will not put people beside farm buildings where there's cows, etc. That's unreasonable. Alternative accesses are permitted. You don't have to use the same laneway. So we are very flexible, and I do think that we can show that if there's a willingness on the applicant's part, we will find a suitable site. And I also think it's a two-storey application. Before there's room on those alternative sites for 2 stories, good sites there, if members are happy to go down that road.
Second Robert's proposal.
We have a proposal to get alternatives. Are we all in agreement? Great, thank you, members.
Happy to support, Chair.
Okay, moving on to application number 5, and that is 069.
Okay, members, so application 5 then, LA 10 2022-0620. It's an outline application by C. McCarroll for an infill dwelling 100 metres north-northeast of 39 Lisdurgan Road in Fintona. The recommendation then is to refuse planning for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 4 reasons. I'll just take members through the details on the screen now, members. As I say, the application site then, it's a rectangular sort of shaped road frontage plot, which is on the screen. You can see there with additional lands then in the control of the applicant in blue. So the field to the rear and then the field to the south as well is within the applicant's control. The application is accompanied by another drawing which indicates a potential second infill site, although that's not part of this application. And what's before you is purely for site 1. In any event, the policy does allow for up to 2 houses, so that isn't that's not really an issue. So the application before you is purely for site 1. Overlaying that then onto the photographs, you can see the site then, the road frontage location beside number 33 with the cemetery then further along the road. The road itself then, members, is across the front of the site and then bends around towards the east. The grey access roads you can see are actually private laneways serving up to the other houses and the other farm buildings. So in terms of nearby buildings, obviously the application is applied for as an infill dwelling. Members will be familiar with the policy tests. So the first test is whether there's a common frontage to the road. Number 33, which is to the northwest of the site, has a common frontage to the road. So there's no issue there. The cemetery as well then has a common frontage to the road, and the application site then would create a ribbon of development. So the infill exceptional test under the infill policy is triggered. However, only 33 and the cemetery have the common frontage. 39 doesn't have the common frontage because of the large field in front of the house. And number 43 then would have a common frontage. I'll just show that in the next slide. So number 43 would have a common frontage because its garden does go down to the road. Out the back of it then there's an ancillary building, but it's behind the house. So it doesn't really have a frontage to the road. So really you only have 33 and 43, the house 33 and 43 with a common frontage to the road. Members will recall you need at least 3. So there's an issue in respect of whether there's a substantial and continuously built up frontage to fill. However, when we're on the ground, members, you can see if you just go back, you can see number 43 is round the corner, around the bend in the road. So it doesn't really create a gap in which you can infill between number 33. It doesn't create a natural gap site in which you can fill, but the farm group then at the bottom is along the road and along the laneway, so it really bookends the site. So there's a gap between number 33 and the farm group. However, you can see the separation distance of 240 metres, so unfortunately within that there's room for 4 development opportunities. So it doesn't meet the policy test in respect of that criteria. Although the application is described as an infill dwelling, it's only fair and reasonable to look at the other policies. Policy CTY 2A would be relevant. There's a church nearby and also a cemetery, which would be a focal point. And you can see the site then is adjacent to the house and the cemetery. However, for the reasons listed within the report, members, the application doesn't really meet the criteria of CTY 2A. The local buildings in the area are well spread out and separated by the green fields between them all, so there's not really a cluster. It's not sited or bounded with development on 2 sides as well, with only number 33 on one side. And so there really doesn't meet the policy test for CTY 2A either. So the recommendation then is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed. So it's contrary to CTY 8, as it's not a small gap sufficient only to accommodate up to 2 houses. It would create a ribbon of development and erode the rural character of the area. Number 3 then is the CTY 2A, new dwellings and existing clusters policy, which unfortunately it doesn't meet either. There's no cluster of development outside of a farm of 4 or more buildings. The cluster or the buildings in the area don't appear as a visual entity in the local landscape. The site's not bounded on at least 2 sides with other development in the cluster, and you can't absorb the development of the site into any cluster through rounding off or consolidation, as it will significantly alter its existing character. And then finally, on number 4, it's contrary to CTY 1, as it's not one of the range of types of development which in principle are considered to be acceptable in the countryside. So, members, the recommendation is to refuse permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 4 reasons.
Thanks, Darren. Okay, we have the agent, Ashley Pierce. Can you hear us?
Certainly, yes.
Okay, you are very welcome, and you have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Planning Committee, councillors and member of the Planning Department. I'd like to thank you for affording me the opportunity to represent my applicant, Mr. Cal McCard, who's currently present, and put forward my reasons for contesting the planning decision. I have been an agent for over 25 years and have yet to come before this new committee system until today. I believe this is a testament to my understanding of and belief in working within the parameters of current legislation, along with the advice and guidance from a good, long-standing working relationship with the Planning Department. Although legislation is categorised and such policies quoted as in black and white, there remains many grey areas when questions are posed and definitive yes or no answers cannot be obtained. Understandably, every application is unique in that they pose different problems, some with workable solutions. As a result, I submitted a preliminary inquiry to the Planning Department, and on the face value of the map submitted, I was advised this would be unlikely to be approved. This was my initial thought too, but after further discussions, fortunately the planning officer took the time to view Street View on Google Earth to get an idea of the perspective I was seeing on the ground. Their findings are very same as mine, thus the reality on the ground portrays a very different perspective than quoting policy looking at a map. After discussing the site findings, it was felt that the maintained decorative stone verge with ranch-style fencing at the top of the embankment between number 33 and the lane at number 39 certainly altered opinion. The ranch fencing and stone verge extends from the lane accessing number 39 and the front of number 43. Along the road frontage, approximately halfway, some 50 metres towards number 33, where it changes to a mixture of well-kept hedge. It should be noted that the hedge row is set back from the road edge and would remain unaltered, except for access to be cut through with minimal disruption, thus having an immediate mature boundary framing the proposed site and the rising topography with a mature backdrop. Although we knew it would not be as straightforward, it was concluded worth considering making an application for one dwelling, demonstrating that the gap in fact could take two dwellings in line with policy CTY 8 of PPS 21, and that's what we did. Clearly, the said infill land lies between number 33 and 43 along the public road known as Listurgan Road. Both properties have well-established boundary vegetation, as does the surrounding fields behind and in front of the site, also owned by the applicant. Travelling from St. Lawrence's Church, we approached the large, well-established graveyard on the right with mature hedgerows. Then number 33 is immediately beside it, a story and three-quarter style dwelling with mature hedgerows. We then have a continuation of hedgerow from 33 across the infill site, some 50 metres, with considerable grass verge between the hedge and the public road. Then the decorative gravel bank with the ranch-style fencing at the top of the bank continues to both sides of the corner, continuing up to and along both sides of the access lane to number 39. Immediately on the bend is the driveway accessing 39 and 41. Immediately beside this and directly facing the corner is number 43, a large two-storey dwelling nestled in mature hedgerows. The infill site is not imposing, but is evident while travelling in this direction and could be developed sympathetically to its rural location to link 33 to 43. I must point out that within a 140-metre radius of the corner fronting number 43, there are 5 dwellings visible. In my submission, I was trying to sympathetically reflect the size, scale and siting of the site to that of number 33, bounding the proposed site, and that of the potential second site of similar proportion, infilling the immediate road frontage linking numbers 33 and 43, in line with the recommendations of CTY 8. This visual link is very evident on the ground. There is one critical viewpoint along the meandering Listurgan Road when travelling in the opposite direction to that already discussed, which lies some 200 metres approximately to the east of number 41. We can clearly identify the roadside gap site, its elevation above the road and the surrounding dwellings and farm buildings together with all the mature vegetation. Here we can see number 41 with its large farm building behind, orientated facing the Listurgan Road. Next we have mature boundaries secluding number 43, which here gables Listurgan Road, with snippets of number 39 behind with a small paddock field to the front. More evident and visible is the access pillars and ranch fencing with the stone verge to number 39, which extends over the face of the infill site, then disappearing behind clusters of trees. The farm building beside number 39, along with the mature hedgerows, forming an instant backdrop to the infill sites. Next, we have number 33 nestled into its mature boundaries. This undoubtedly presents itself as a continuous build-up frontage from this vantage point, in line with CTY 8, with a small gap separating 41, 43 and 33, capable of accommodating 2 number infill dwellings sympathetically reflecting that of number 33. I was fortunate enough to design number 39 and 43, and their setback referred to in the planning refusal was a result of planning stipulation. The nature of the particular area is large one-off houses set in generous plots with a mixture of long driveways to numbers 39, 41 and 43 and road frontage to numbers 33 and 43. Number 39 is some 3,700 square feet and number 43 around 2,800 square feet with a detached two-storey garage of around 1,000 square feet. The property known as number 39 is an active farm holding owned by the applicant's family. As pointed out by planning, it does not have common frontage adjoining the Listurgan Road, as it had a siting condition to locate it in close proximity to the farm buildings, and therefore is accessed via a lane directly on the corner of Listurgan Road beside number 43. This lane also accesses a neighbouring active farm and dwelling known as 41 Listurgan Road. The pillars of the access, ranch-style fencing and stone verge extends the visual domestic appearance and draws in number 39 to read visually as curtilage to the property. The same can be said for the adjoining shed to the north of number 39, which in fact would be a backdrop to the rear of the proposed sites, around 80 metres away from the site curtilage. I strongly feel the lane accessing number 39 is a definitive boundary, also with ranch-style fencing bounding both sides of the lane. Number 43 is located directly on the corner, has a natural and mature boundary with the river. It has 4 mature boundaries enclosing the site, with the lane accessing number 41 running parallel to the boundary. The field that the planning service refers to as being part of the gap to meet with the farm buildings to the rear of 41 to form part of a bookend could, in theory, be a direct reflection of the curtilage of number 43, some 100-metre long site, and thus the proposed site the same, hence fulfilling the obligations of the planning department, rather than suggested potential of 4 sites. I do feel, though, that the farm buildings referred to bookend the site have little bearing nor any visual relationship to the proposed site or reading of them to bookend the infill development, given it's off a 130-metre long lane and the topography when viewing on the ground. It certainly looks fine on a map, though. This would, however, cause additional problems and is not a warranted solution given the already shared lane and outlook from number 39 would directly impact on the development here. So I revert back to our original proposal of infill along the public road between numbers 33 and 43. I fail to see how we contravene CTY8 and how allowing the development would cause a ribbon to the graveyard and number 33 if approved. We have applied for one of 2 sites. The second would be applied for immediately, assuming approval of the first without unnecessary expense. As an infill between 2 well-established and mature properties, clearly fronting and accessing the public road, namely numbers 33 and 43, and the visual link of number 41 directly behind number 43, also taking into account the domestic arrangement to the access of number 39 as an extension of the curtilage. Should a decision not be reached today, I would welcome you to attend a site visit to establish an outcome favourable to the applicant, where it is evident the proposed site and potential second site are in fact infill and visually read between numbers 33 and 43. This will establish topography, the mature vegetation around the immediate locality and beyond, the visual impact from critical viewpoints, and how this infill can integrate successfully, naturally grouping the dwellings together, which are currently separated by a gap site. Thank you for your time and opportunity to speak, and welcome any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Have we any questions, members? If there's no questions, only for the light I wouldn't be able to see you then.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in relation to, I suppose, thank Ashley for speaking to the committee. In essence, really, is the main point being made that the gap really on the ground wouldn't accommodate 4 dwellings, that would only accommodate a maximum of 2 when considered in relation to other cartridges around the road. And I suppose that's the one question. And then there was no real images submitted, were there, that maybe would indicate that I'm struggling. Now, I know the road, and I've been on the road many times, but I don't be analysing the road or anything. So I'm wondering, there's no images submitted that would show those viewpoints and maybe give us a sense, because that's something I did notice when it was being presented, that we didn't really have that critical viewpoint, on that road, and that's quite a sharp corner there, so it doesn't maybe read the way it perhaps looks on the map. Just for maybe Ashley to consider that. And maybe it might be helpful, sorry, Chair, that if Ashley was to just go back to the images that we do have, showing the site plan, just to clarify the crux of the point being made, really, in relation to the 2 site infill.
Okay. Is that the one? Okay. Ashley, did you want to comment there?
Yeah, there's a critical viewpoint from, can't describe this because of my actual image is over the face of the maps. The number 43, if you look east of it, the road continues round. That is the main vantage point where you actually can consider the road frontage. 43, 41, 43, and 33, and the graveyard. And there is a direct gap, which is evident between 33 and 43. 43 actually screens the lands that link the lanes to the farm buildings. So we have to consider the actual roadway and the way that it presents itself in reality, that when you're actually physically on the road, what you do see. Maps actually certainly portray a very different opinion to what we do visually see in reality.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. There's no other questions there. So at this stage, I'm going to move on. We have representation by 2 councillors, Stephen McCann and Bert Wilson. So first of all, Stephen McCann's is a written statement in support of the application, and I'm going to read that out first, and then I'm going to invite Bert in to make his comments. So this is comments from Councillor Stephen McCann. Having availed of the opportunity to visit the site along with the applicant and the agent, I have no hesitation in adding my support to the application here today. I think we can all agree that when it comes to planning policy and the interpretation of it, it is not simply black and white. There will be grey areas which arise, and this committee has seen this many times in the past. In terms of what is before you today, in my opinion, it fits within the parameters of the infill policy. I note that the agent has been proactive in engaging with our planning officials at an early stage, even before submitting this application. The result of this engagement was the submission of this application. I understand that the planning officials saw the same merit in this application following a site visit as the applicant and the agent did. A bit, it wasn't simply black and white. It did, however, meet the spirit of the policy. I didn't want to repeat what the agent has put before you in terms of his responses to the reasons for refusal to this application. However, I do want to emphasise that it is his interpretation of the policy, and for the reason he presents to you today, this application can and should be approved. I note Mr. Pearce is presenting to us today for the first time, having worked in this field for over 25 years. He is a man that knows what he is talking about. Our planning team, being equally qualified, present a different view, and that's okay too. However, when there are alternative interpretations of policy, the balance of fairness must fall in favour of our constituent. I hope you will approve this application for Mr. Carroll today. That ends Stephen's contribution in support of the application. And now I'd ask Bert to make his contribution, and Bert, you have floor is yours.
Yes, Chair. Well, the officers do agree that it does not adversely impact on residential amenities in the area. The northern boundary is well established with trees and field hedge, and the critical approach from the south, a new dwelling with a modest ridge height would be visually integrated into the site and meet the policy test of CTY 13 of PPS 21. There is no third-party objections, and the site could be developed to provide a suitable sized house and garden space without harming the amenities of the adjacent houses. This is the planner's words, not mine. All the sites and the existing dwellings in the area are fairly large, and I would contend that the site could possibly absorb two decent sized dwellings similar to what is in that area. On one side we have the church and the graveyard and number 33, and to me that does present a cluster. On the other side, the focal point again on the is number 33, 41 and 43, and these do present another cluster. Urban development should not be irrelevant. Should be not be relevant on the site. It has a gentle slope, and one dwellings wouldn't read together in any way. As the visibility sprays, the planners speak about them. Well, they are on the applicant's ownership, and they are available within the site and the adjacent verge, and they can be included within the red lines. And obviously, the architect and the applicant has had quite a bit of debate about this, and if there's any possibility of rearranging some of the red lines or that are presented to the committee, I'm quite sure that they could still develop a bit of a movement, and the applicant would be agreeable to go down that line. So I would ask the committee to really take this on board and give the applicant the benefit of the doubt, if there is any, and grant an approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bert. I'm going to ask Darren then to give his comments.
Members, happy to take any questions really may have in respect of the application.
Okay, thanks, Darren. John?
Right, Darren, can you bring up the photograph with the 4 red squares on it? Right. Fortunately, I know this road particularly well. I'm not going into the reasons why, but so you come down there and it's you slightly tilt, and then you're immediately hit by a 90-degree plus turn, and then there's a lane into the farmyard, and it splits and goes up to the other farmyard. That's correct. So if this is an infill site, those two, surely the lower 2 boxes in the photograph are not fronting onto a road.
Yeah.
I think if I can go back a map, Councillor, so the critical issue here is, first of all, there has to be ribbon development to allow us to go into exception tests. So I know the applicant and agent, or the agent and Bert said there was no ribbon. There has to be a ribbon. So if we can agree there is a ribbon, that allows us to get into the exception test. The next thing then is, within that exception test is it a small gap between buildings? And that's essentially what's wrong with this site. There's no photographs of the site because the bends in the road, I couldn't get them to realistically show the position on the ground, members, because it just didn't work. Nonetheless, that's not important. What's important is, when you're looking at the aerial photographs, is there a gap that you could fill in? For example, a gap between myself and the chair. There's a gap in the middle. Is that situation on the ground? In this case, you've number 33. So you need something at the bottom along the edge of the road or the laneway. And this is where planning officers are very willing to, and members agree, I'm sure, to take a flexible approach. It says along the road. It doesn't say it has to be public road. And in my view, you could look at laneways as being roads. So I think it's reasonable to say that laneway is part of the frontage as well. So there's no issue there. So I wouldn't get too concerned about that. The critical question is, you have 33, you have the site, what's below it? And are you filling a gap in? And the bend in the road means 43 is swung round, so it's not below it. It's not creating a gap. And that's the difficulty.
Yeah, that's, I think, so you're saying that the bottom, if we go to the one with the 4 squares, that the bottom 2 can still be counted as potential sites or infill, rather than if that was part of the farm?
Sorry, John, coming across you. What I was saying is that although 43 is swung around to the side,
yeah,
and doesn't create a gap, there is a gap between 33 and those farm buildings.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's a reasonable position to take. And had those farm buildings been further up and there was only room for 2, I could have quite happily said, yes, that meets the policy, and we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
The difficulty is say, whenever you measure it out, there's 240 meters of a distance between those farm buildings and the site. So that leaves you with that potential for 4. And that's the difficulty we have. And say the house number 43 is swung around the bend, so it doesn't create that gap, it doesn't create a natural gap which you're going to fill in. And that's what the policy is essentially doing, saying there's a gap there in the middle of a frontage, you could put a house in there, not make any difference to the character, the appearance of the area. That's not the case here.
But if we could straighten the road, then that would solve the problem. Isn't that basically what you're saying? If we could fold the road round and make that the end?
If number 39, you can see the farmhouse of 39, if that was down at the road, just go down, just straight across the field and down to the edge of where the 2 lanes are. If that was sitting there, we wouldn't be here today, essentially. But we don't have that situation on the ground. And again, this issue about fencing and the laneway being part of the common frontage and all of those issues, we've had that before, that discussion before. That's a consistent position that we are taking here as planning officers, that unless your garden goes down to the road or your house is at the road, the laneways, don't really count as part of that. And that has been tested at appeal as well by unsuccessful applicants. So I think by continuing on with that as being consistent to all parties and adopting that approach. As I say, so it doesn't meet the tests of the...
So it's basically, you're saying that it doesn't matter whether it's a road of any description, it doesn't matter whether it's a public road or a privately owned road?
I think that's a reasonable approach to allow members to, the council to approve applications on other sites. So I don't want to go any other way.
Yeah, thank you, Darren.
There was a comment, members, just about the farm, and there is an active farm here. And much like the last one, I'm sure there's an active farm and no development opportunities have been sold off, et cetera, et cetera. So there may be options of pursuing, sites under CTY 10. And I have raised that with the applicant's agent, but they're keen to progress on with this application. But officers will be willing, if this is unsuccessful, to meet out on site and look at CTY 10 and see whether there's an opportunity there. But as I say, before you today, members, unfortunately, the recommendation is to refuse.
Okay, Glenn?
Suppose, Chair, I mean, I've took the opportunity to look at Google Maps and Google Street View, and I do think, that Street View images would have been beneficial to the committee, because I think that the entrance, that entrance on that bend, technically it's the entrance to the cement lane, but it reads almost part of the entrance to the house beside it. it's significant, and you could say it's out of the ordinary in terms of its impact visually. I can say that with no hesitation. There's the ranch fencing, which we heard a lot about. We probably didn't hear a lot about the stoned verge, which is significant in my eyes. So I do feel that I have sympathy for the comments of the agent in that this isn't easily interpreted by the maps. I am finding this more useful, Chair, just at point at this stage. Thank you.
Just remind members that the infill is between buildings, members, so there may be ranch fencing, et cetera, and gates and things. It's the buildings that you're filling the gap between, and that is the important point, but yeah, defer to you.
Okay. No other questions?
Chair, can I point out just one matter that Darren has raised here?
No, sorry, you can't come back in again.
Okay.
Okay, members, this is just an opportunity for you to ask for any advice, and if not, I'm looking for a proposal. Robert?
Yeah, I've been sitting patiently listening. Again, I'm, as you know, look towards policy. And in the past, we've actually gone and made decisions that were verging, on black and white. They were grey. And some of them actually were bad decisions, in my opinion. We have an opportunity possibly here to explore alternatives within the site, and we took that opportunity the last one. I think we should explore that rather than, in my opinion, make a bad decision here one way or the other. So my proposal is we defer back to Darren to explore, along with the agent and the applicant, other possibilities, so we can actually all rule them out, and then we know we're facing with a decision one way or the other. So that's my proposal. Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Cheers, Rob. Tommy?
I'm going to Carly, thanks for that, Chair. And I was putting on my light to come along with the similar proposal, so I'm quite happy to second Robert's proposal, Chair. Thank
you, Chair, and again, happy to support Councillor Irvine's proposal. Common sense. Thank you.
Okay,
sorry,
Darren?
Could I just come in, members? Just in relation to the deferral, that's for you to decide, obviously. The only concern I have is that our protocol says that deferrals will be, exceptional, will be rare. In this case, the alternatives that we would be looking at would be alternatives on a different policy on a different site, and therefore will not really be directly related to this application. If members wish to go ahead and determine this application one way or another, that CTY 10 option is still going to be there in the background, and officers are very willing to work with the applicant to explore those. But I would encourage members, in the interest of not only getting a decision on the application, but also targets and workloads, etc., bringing applications back again. Next month is going to be a very busy schedule, and we also have the new planning system being brought in, our planning portal. Officers are incredibly busy, so respectfully, I would ask maybe members if they were willing to determine this one. We can still engage outside of this application for CTY 10.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Robert.
Bearing that in mind, I don't normally like deferring, but I think in the instance of equity, and if it does pushes a target out, we are very good. And I think our officers, and Darren, I know you're speaking on behalf of the officers, will do their best. I don't particularly want to determine this. I wanted to get a deferral, so I'm happy to go with the deferral.
Okay, Tommy? Okay, so I take it that we're still holding for a deferral here. Is everybody in agreement? Yeah, okay.
Agreed, Chair, for me. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move along, and thank everybody for their contribution to those applications. We have planning decisions issued in July and August, and that's item number 8. And is it Kim? Oh.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, members, the report is for noting. Just in terms of the decisions issued, there's 185 decisions issued over the 2 months. And, you know, I suppose when you look at holidays and summer leave that officers would have been on and our commitment, we have 68 officers at the minute committed towards the rolling out the new planning portal. So generally content that that's a substantial amount of issuing over that period. And, you know, the unvalidated stats that we're getting back as well on each month is that those are within target. So we're meeting the target as well in the local applications. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. And Robert?
I'm happy to propose noting, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Earl?
Happy to second the noting, Chair.
Okay. All agreed, members? Okay. Moving on to note the update report on planning enforcement in July and August. That's item 9.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And again, members, the report is for noting, and it just covers enforcement activity during July and August, again, the summer period. There was one notice served, and that related to a breach of condition. In terms of caseload update, 21 enforcement cases were closed in July and August, with 26 new cases opened. Thanks, Chair.
So we're going in the right direction. Paul?
Opposed to note.
Thanking you. And Tommy?
A second, Chair.
Thank you. Agreed, members? Note to report on planning committee actions from May to July, and that's paper F.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is the quarterly update on our planning actions, and members will note there were 12 actions from May to July, 9 of them complete, 3 in progress, 2 of which were considered today in terms of the ad hoc committee's findings, and 1 outstanding application which will come to the October meeting. So it's for noting.
So proposed, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. And
happy to second, Chair.
Earl, you get a second in this time.
Thank you.
Okay. All agreed, members? Thank you. And correspondence, item 11.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And members, this was correspondence from Donegal County Council, and that was in relation to their screening report for the draft Letterkenny plan and transport plan. We had brought the correspondence in the July meeting, and members delegated the authority to reply on that consultation, the officers. So just looking at the response that issued, members, I'll say for information only, we highlighted the great importance of conserving and sustaining and enhancing our natural environment, which is a key strategic objective within the plan, our own draft plan strategy. In terms of the screening reports, Letterkenny is a significant distance from our own council boundary, so there's unlikely to be any areas of concern. But we did offer 3 or 4 points in terms of good practice there for Donegal County Council to consider. The draft plan itself, members, which will be important and we will want to carefully consider, will be coming forward, I think, in November for consultation, and we'll prepare a report when we receive that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Anthony?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, proposed to note.
Okay, thank you. And have I a seconder? Robert? Thank you. All agreed? Our second piece of correspondence?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And this is a consultation on a local application for a development garage from Mid-Ulster. And the reason for the consultation, members, was that the access point with the public road and a small portion of the laneway, including the sightlines, was within the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area. And having consulted with Philip, our lead legal officer, it was obvious that any application within our own district boundary needed to be determined by us. So we replied, members setting that out to Mid-Ulster Council, and we're currently working with the planning agent in relation to an application that will come before ourselves. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Can I have a proposer and seconder to note? Robert and Paul? All agreed? Okay, item number 12 then is any urgent or relevant business. And John Coyle wishes to bring up. There we go.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's been brought to my attention that some applications within the system is being held up by statutory consultees. And I'd like to highlight that the lengthy delays in reconsultations, writing back in time, looking for more information, which delays and impacts our performance when it comes to meeting our targets. I would request that we write to all statutory consultees voicing our dissatisfaction at the delay and ask when responding a comprehensive response is given and no holding or minor responses so that they can cover themselves, meeting response deadlines set down in legislation. It is when DFI send out and say that we haven't met our targets for, minor or major applications, they do not look underneath and see that council staff and officers are doing, their utmost to get the applications out, but it is people that are in other agencies that are holding the process up. So I just want to highlight the issue because it is a bugbear for many of our applicants. Thank you.
Absolutely, John. It's been an age-old problem and doesn't seem to be getting any better. Okay, you're happy to second that? Okay, we all agreed there, members? No other urgent or relevant business, so we go to part 2. So Paul and Earl to go into confidential matters. And we give a wee indication when we're good to go. Yeah. This time?
Okay, members, during confidential business, members considered matters arising from the confidential minutes of the meeting held on 20th of July 2022, and there were no matters arising.
Okay, members, that thank you. Proposed by Mary and Josephine, seconded. All agreed? Thank you very much, members. That concludes the meeting. Thank you for your cooperation. Thank our members online as well as our officers and minutes.